Chapter 1004. I'm not a ghost, I'm a cultivator. She said again. Cultivator? The little boy knew that there were many cultivators in this city. Those adults were all high and mighty figures. Those people were respectfully called immortal masters. What did immortal masters come here for? Are you willing to be my disciple? Gu Shengyin asked directly. Disciple? A cultivator wanted to take him as a disciple? The little boy was surprised for a second, but he immediately reacted. I'm just a beggar. There are many powerful young masters and young ladies in this city. How can those good-for-nothings compare to you? Gu Shengyin's tone was indifferent, as if she was saying something that was natural. Compared to your aptitude, those people are just ants. The little boy was a little confused. In his memory, the most people showed to him was disgust and contempt, and the most words they said to him were, little beggar, and ugly. No one had ever said that he was better than others. Then, in the future, can I be as powerful as those immortal masters? He tried to look around, hoping to see that mysterious immortal master. Gu Shengyin was amused by his ambition. If you're talking about the cultivators in this city, the most powerful one is at the late stage of foundation establishment. How can my disciple be at this level? In the future, you can turn them into ashes with just a flick of your finger. The little boy was still a little vigilant. He was only 8 years old, but he had already encountered a lot of things. He didn't believe that someone would come to him for free. Gu Shengyin looked at his expression and secretly nodded in her heart. He was vigilant, not bad. Although he didn't want to raise an ingrate like Jojo, he also didn't want to raise an ignorant fool. I can make a vow with you, I'll take you as my disciple, and I'll do my best to pass on your cultivation method. After you succeed, you'll find me the materials to reconstruct my physical body. Neither side can betray the other. If there's a breach of the vow, the heavens will punish you and you won't be able to reincarnate. No matter how much words were spoken, it could never be compared to a vow that was bound by the Tao of heaven. The little boy was smart. He knew that this was most likely a chance to change his life. Even if the other party was lying to him, in his current state, what was there to be deceived by others? Immediately, he knelt down and bowed 3 times to the void. Disciple greets master. This was what he had heard from the storyteller. Gu Shengyin looked at him. If it had been 10,000 years ago, if the Jinghong fairy had said that she wanted to take in a disciple, who knew how many geniuses would have rushed forward to burn incense, bathe, worship the heaven and earth, and drink 3 cups of tea and 6 rites, she didn't expect her first disciple to be accepted so carelessly. Oh well, times are different now. Gu Shengyin accepted his salute. Somehow, she felt that there seemed to be karma that had fallen on her. This meant that the heavenly Tao had acknowledged their relationship. What's your name? She asked for the second time. The little boy hesitated for a moment before shaking his head. I don't have a name. Everyone calls me little beggar. How could a little beggar who couldn't even guarantee food and clothing have the mind to give himself a name? Gu Shengyin thought for a moment. Since you've taken me as your master, I'll give you a name. According to the seniority of my disciples, you should be from the Yen generation. You'll be called Yen Sui. Are you willing to take my surname? The little boy's eyes lit up. I'm willing. Good, then you'll be called Gu Yensui. Chapter 1005. That night, Gu Shengyin and Gu Yensui talked a lot. Gu Yensui knew that his master was a very powerful immortal master who had lost his physical body in an accident and was trapped in the purple firmament ring. Gu Shengyin, on the other hand, had gained a deeper understanding of her little disciple. He did not know who his parents were, and from the earliest memories, he had lived with an old beggar. That old beggar had not been very good to him and he had probably kept him as a pet to relieve his loneliness. Even so, the old beggar had been his only family member. His only family member had passed away last winter. Gu Shengyin thought that compared to her own disciple, the treatment that Jojo had suffered in the Qiao family was nothing. After all, the Qiao family still had to keep up appearances and they would not shortchange their family members. Looking at Gu Yensui's dirty and black clothes, Gu Shengyin sighed. Put your hand into your pocket. Gu Yensui did as he was told and touched something hard. It was a black ring. Gu Yensui asked curiously, "This is the purple firmament ring that master mentioned?" With such a powerful name, he had thought that it would be something good. It did not look like much at all. A young child's thoughts were written all over his face. Gu Xingyin said, "Bite your middle finger and drip a drop of blood on it." She was now considered a ring spirit, and dripping a drop of blood on the ring was just a ritual. The key was to gain her recognition as a ring spirit. Gu Yensui did as he was told. The dark red blood dripped onto the black ring, and the originally unremarkable ring instantly changed. It was as if something had wiped away the outer layer of darkness and revealed the inner layer of light. The true appearance of the purple heaven ring was also revealed. It was a spiritual weapon refined from an extremely rare 1,000-year-old purple jade. Complex runes were engraved on it, and it looked very delicate. The whole ring shone in the darkness. Gu Yensui stared at the ring in his hand that had changed greatly and then looked at his dirty hands. He suddenly felt that he was not worthy to hold it. Gu Xingyin felt a new power being transmitted into his soul, and the feeling of weakness that he had felt earlier instantly disappeared. This was the benefit of forming a contract. She moved her consciousness and a large pile of things appeared on the ground of the run-down temple. That little bottle on the left. Pick it up. There are white elixirs in it. Take one and it will make you go hungry for 10 days. Fortunately, these things were sealed in the purple firmament ring. If they were outside, they would have all been destroyed in 10,000 years. Gu Yensui reached out and was about to take it when he suddenly paused. He put the ring on the ground and ran to the back of the run-down temple. Gu Xingyin's consciousness could now extend up to 5 meters and she could see clearly that he was washing his hands. When he came out again, Gu Yensui's hands had been washed clean and he washed his face as well. Gu Xingyin looked at the child with red lips and white teeth in amazement. It was hard to imagine that this was the little beggar from earlier. Gu Yensui smiled embarrassedly and said, "My face was painted like that on purpose. Old Shang told me that if I don't want to be sold by bad people, I have to do that." Old Shang was the old beggar who had raised Gu Yensui. Gu Xingyin looked at his exquisite face and understood what the old beggar had said. In this world, men and women who were beautiful but did not have the ability to protect themselves all ended up in a miserable state. Chapter 1006. It's a pity I don't have any clothes you can wear. Tomorrow, take this spirit stone to the pawn shop and exchange it for some money you can use here. Jinghong Fairy's purple heaven ring naturally wouldn't have anything bad. After rummaging for a long time, she finally found a few mid-grade spirit stones among the countless high-grade spirit stones. Mid-grade spirit stones were extremely hard to come by in Eastern Cloud City. The next day, Jin Yuzhai, the largest pawn shop in Eastern Cloud City, had a guest who didn't fit in. As the largest pawn shop in Eastern Cloud City, Jin Yuzhai's customers were all rich and respectable. But today, a little beggar in ragged clothes came. But speaking of which, although this little beggar's clothes weren't very good and were old and tattered, his body was very clean and his appearance was extremely rare. To be able to work here as a clerk, the clerk wasn't stupid. He didn't look down on Gu Yensui just because of his appearance. "This little young master, why have you come here?" he asked carefully. It was Gu Yensui's first time entering a place like this, so he was actually a bit scared. But he firmly remembered his master's words to him, "You are my disciple. In terms of status, no one in this world is more noble than you. You don't need to fear anyone." He raised his head and said crisply, "I'm here to pawn something." He was very handsome. When he raised his head like this, he really did look a bit like a young master from an aristocratic family. Even the trace of nervousness in his eyes was interpreted by the clerk as him being afraid to go out alone. After all, he was still so young. "What does little young master want to pawn?" the clerk asked with a smile. Gu Yensui glanced at him. According to what Gu Xingyin taught him, you can't make the decision, find someone who can. The clerk was shocked when he heard this. He was even more certain that this little young master wasn't an ordinary person. But his appearance, Gu Yensui's little face stiffened. "What? Is this how Jin Yuzhai treats its customers? The waiter's expression changed. He smiled and said, "Young master, please don't be angry. Please take a seat and rest for a while. I will call the steward." He left in a hurry. Soon, a smart-looking middle-aged man with a mustache followed him in. The middle-aged man had obviously heard about what had happened from the waiter. The moment he saw Gu Yensui, he began to greet him. "I heard that young master wants to pawn something in our humble abode." He secretly sized up Gu Yensui. But looking at his appearance, he really didn't look like he was raised by an ordinary family. Putting aside his dressing, his hands didn't look like they belonged to a pampered young master of an aristocratic family. Could it be a lie? At this moment, the steward suddenly felt an immense pressure crushing down on him. Cold sweat instantly dripped down his back. At the same time, an old female voice sounded coldly in his mind. "Is the young master of our family someone you can casually size up?" The steward hurriedly shifted his gaze away and raised his hands to apologize. "Senior, please forgive me." This junior just couldn't help but take a few more glances at the young master's unique physique. It was only then that the pressure moved away. The steward was drenched in cold sweat. He was a late-stage foundation establishment cultivator. In Dongyun City, he could be considered a high-level expert. But the voice just now was able to suppress him with just pressure. It was obvious that this person was at least a great realm higher than him. A middle-stage golden core cultivator as a guard. What exactly was the background of this little young master? Gao Lingji said, "His background is very big. He's the disciple of a tribulation-passing stage ancestor. If I tell you, you'll be scared to death. If you don't give me the ticket, I'll release the female lead and scare an Imeng to death." Humph. Chapter 1007. A smile quickly appeared on the manager's face, and he said to Gu Yensui in a gentle tone, "I wonder what young master wants to sell in my Jin Yuzhai?" A brocade pouch appeared in Gu Yensui's hand, and he casually tossed it to the manager. The manager's eyes narrowed. With his eyesight, he could naturally see that the brocade pouch had appeared in the young master's hand out of thin air. In other words, this young master had at least one storage spirit tool in his hand. A storage spiritual artifact was definitely something that could only be found by chance. The steward's opinion of Gu Yensui rose to another level in his heart. Gu Yensui said with a serious face, "Open it and see." The manager hurriedly opened the pouch in his hand. Gu Xingyin looked at Gu Yensui's appearance and wanted to laugh. He had delicate features, and with such a serious face, he didn't give people the slightest impression of dignity. Instead, he looked very cute. She had picked up a cute treasure. Gu Xingyin thought to herself. The manager opened the pouch in his hand, and his entire body froze for a moment. Inside this brocade pouch, there was actually a dense array of glowing mid-grade spirit stones. Sensing the spiritual power overflowing from them, he found that these were mid-grade spirit stones of the highest quality, only a little bit away from second-rate high-grade spirit stones. Mid-grade spirit stones, ah. In Eastern Cloud City, the currency used between cultivators was basically spirit beads. Only the young masters and young ladies of those large aristocratic families would use spirit stones. Of course, the most they could possess were low-grade spirit stones. He had never heard of anyone in Eastern Cloud City who could casually toss out so many high-quality mid-grade spirit stones. This young master couldn't have come from some other large city, right? As if confirming his guess, the young master in front of him seemed to grumble with some dissatisfaction. "After coming to this place, I don't even have a place to spend my money, apart from those large sects, who would use mid-grade spirit stones as currency." The manager took a deep breath and said with a smile, "There are 49 mid-grade spirit stones here. Does young master want to pawn them all? What do you want in exchange?" Gu Yensui rolled his eyes and said, "First, find 2 sets of clothes that I can wear. Remember, don't bring me the ones that are too bad. As for the rest, I'll take a look myself." The steward nodded his head repeatedly. In his heart, he was also bewildered. With the protection of such an expert, he did not know how this young master had fallen to such a state. He thought for a while, but still couldn't figure it out. He shook his head and ordered the assistant beside him to bring a few sets of clothes over. How could Gu Yensui recognize these things? To him, everything that he had experienced today was like a dream. He entered Jinyuzhai, a place he never dared to dream of. The shop assistants and stewards, who were usually arrogant, welcomed him with smiles. All of this was given to me by Master. He silently thought as he grew more and more curious about the master he had never met. The steward followed beside him. Seeing that this young master's expression did not even change as he looked at the top-grade spirit tools, he was even more certain that the other must have seen many good things on a daily basis. That was why he was so calm. However, he was thinking too much. Gu Yensui was so calm only because he did not know what these things were or how much they were worth. Gu Xingyin, on the other hand, completely despised these things. Chapter 1008. What the hell are these things? Her brows furrowed deeply. How could these crudely made things have the nerve to call them spiritual tools? Gu Xingyin looked at them for a while and couldn't stand it anymore. She said to Gu Yensui, "Let's go look at the spiritual herbs." Hearing Gu Yensui's request, the steward was shocked. Could it be that this young master didn't like any of them? He didn't show it on his face and only led Gu Yensui to look at the spiritual herbs. Shi Lingxi was a strong cultivator in the crossing calamity stage. Even if she wasn't an alchemist, her level of refining medicine was much higher than that of ordinary mid-level alchemists. Now, she had to lay a good foundation for Gu Yensui's body. Gu Yensui had never cultivated before, so she could only start from the lowest level of cultivation medicine. As for medicinal herbs, there were no low-level things in the Jinghong Fairy's purple heaven ring. Fortunately, there were all kinds of low-level medicinal herbs here. The steward followed them and watched this young master walk while pointing at the spiritual herbs one by one for him to pack. The more he looked, the more shocked he was. It seemed that he was going to refine medicine. But among these medicinal herbs, there were low-level and high-level ones. He had never heard that refining that kind of medicine required these kinds of spiritual herbs. "Give me 20 sets of all of these." Gu Yensui pointed at the things he had just chosen. "Just deduct it from the spirit stones I just took out." While they were talking, the shop assistant had already brought the clothes over. At this moment, the steward also felt that this young master's ragged clothes were really unsightly, so he suggested that he change clothes first. The shop assistant held the clothes and brought Gu Yensui to the cloakroom. But after the shop assistant left, Gu Yensui stood there for a long time without moving. Gu Xingyin was about to ask when she heard the child's shy words. Master, later, can you not look?" Gu Xingyin couldn't help but laugh. Was she shy? She probed with her divine sense. Sure enough, the child's fair face was flushed red, and his hands were tightly clasped together. She laughed. Okay. I won't look. You're a boy. Why are you so shy?" Gu Yensui pursed his lips and began to change his clothes after receiving his master's reply. However, after a while, Gu Xingyin heard her little disciple calling out to her again. "Master?" Gu Xingyin didn't look at him and only asked, "What's wrong?" Gu Yensui sounded like he was about to cry. I won't." Gu Xingyin, she could only look over. As it turned out, the clothes that the shop assistant had prepared were all standard for aristocratic family members. Gu Yensui couldn't make all those complicated clothes, underwear, robes, belts, and so on by himself. Although Gu Xingyin knew how to put them on, she didn't have a body now. She could only say it verbally and couldn't help much. Thus, the shop assistant waiting outside received a summons from the young master inside. "Come here, help me put on my clothes." A muffled voice came from inside. The shop assistant didn't seem to be surprised. He went in and saw Gu Yensui standing there alone with his clothes in his arms. His face seemed to be a little red. He chuckled as he helped Gu Yensui put on his clothes one by one. He sighed in his heart, he is indeed the son of an aristocratic family. This young master must have been served since he was young. He doesn't even know how to wear clothes. What a beautiful misunderstanding. Chapter 1009. Gu Yensui tried his best to follow what Gu Xingyin taught him. He kept a straight face and put on a proud expression. His bag of middle-grade spirit stones was not only used to exchange for a lot of elixirs and 2 sets of clothes, but also a lot of low-grade spirit stones and spirit beads for his daily expenses. When it was time to leave, the steward personally sent him out of the door very attentively. When Gu Yensui came out of the golden fish algae again, no one could associate him with the ragged little beggar from before. When others saw him, they would only feel strange. Which family would let such a young master come out by himself? When they walked to the side of the road, Gu Xingyin asked him, "Are you hungry?" Gu Yensui shook his head. He ate a pill given to him by his master, so he didn't feel hungry at all. Gu Xingyin was someone who had raised a child. She thought of Alan Eyre, the child that she had raised single-handedly. The two of them were both raised by her, but their circumstances were completely different. Alan Eyre was born with the blessings of all the elves and was liked by everyone. When he was with her, he would act spoiled and directly say what he wanted. He was completely a child who grew up in a jar of honey. But Gu Yensui was different. The first 8 years of his life had left a deep mark on his life. In the past, when he wanted something, he didn't have the ability to have it. Now that he could have it, he was used to suppressing his desires. For example, just now, Gu Xingyin saw very clearly that he swallowed his saliva when he looked at the vendors selling sugar figurines on the side of the road. Perhaps, for a long time in his life, eating cheap and inferior sugar figurines was an extravagant hope. Yen Sui. Gu Xingyin didn't even realize how gentle her voice was. "Master?" Gu Yensui obediently shouted. "Do you want to eat sugar figurines?" she asked. Gu Yensui hesitated for a moment. Gu Xingyin encouraged him, "If you want to eat, say it out loud and go buy it." Gu Yensui looked up at the vendor again and nodded. "Yes." Gu Xingyin felt a little sour in her heart. She said, "If you want to eat, then take the money and buy one. Remember, Yen Sui, you are now my disciple. No matter what you want to do, as long as it's not something outrageous, you can do it. Master is here." Gu Yensui's eyes were a little red. He didn't say anything and just ran to the vendor to buy a candy figurine. He still remembered that he had passed by this place countless times and saw other children happily buying food under the guidance of adults. At that time, the old beggar was still alive. It was rare for him to tell him that he wanted to eat the candy man. But how did the old beggar answer, "I don't even have food to eat, and you still want to eat candy? If you have the money, you might as well buy a steamed bun." Since then, he had never said what he wanted. Because he knew that he couldn't afford it. But now, he had his master. Although his master couldn't hold his hand like other parents, she was always by his side. He put the candy figurine in his mouth. The sweet taste spread from the tip of his tongue to his heart. It didn't taste very good, and it was even a little too sweet. But Gu Yensui felt that he had never eaten something so delicious in his life. "Master," he called out softly. Gu Xingyin didn't hear him clearly. Gu Yensui didn't say anything else and just licked the candy figurine in his hand. "Thank you, master." Chapter 1010. "Damn little bastard, how dare you steal my things? I'll beat you to death." A middle-aged man was beating a little beggar in front of him. The little beggar was like a weak little chick under the middle-aged man's hands. He had no room to resist at all. There were many people watching the scene, but no one spoke up to help the little beggar. Many people were even jeering. "Teacher." Gu Yensui looked there seriously and suddenly opened his mouth. "What's wrong?" Gu Yensui was obviously a little confused. "I know this person. He used to bully me. He stole my food and made me hungry for 2 days." Gu Xingyin didn't understand what he meant and asked, "So? Did he want to take revenge?" Gu Yensui frowned his beautiful eyebrows, "But when I look at him, I feel that he is very pitiful. He stole because he was so hungry that he couldn't take it anymore. That burly man didn't suffer much loss." Gu Xingyin heard this and understood what he meant. She didn't expect that Gu Yensui, who grew up in such an environment, would have a pure heart that was not polluted. Gu Yensui asked her at this time, "Teacher, do you think I should go out and stop that strong man now?" Gu Xingyin gave him the choice. "Yensui, I said that you only need to think about what you want to do. For example, at this moment, if you want to help that child, go. If you don't want to, don't go. It's good that you think about it clearly." Gu Yensui seemed to have never made such a big decision by himself. The little beggar's voice in front of him was getting louder and louder. Gu Yensui finally made up his mind. He almost ran in front of the strong man and shouted, "Stop fighting." When the strong man heard someone stop him, he was a little unhappy and turned his head with a fierce face. But when he saw Gu Yensui dressed like a rich young master, his momentum couldn't help but weaken. He was just a commoner. He couldn't afford to offend such a young master. However, he wasn't willing to let the thief off just like that. The big man said in a muffled voice, "Little young master, you don't know. This little beggar always steals from my family. It's obviously my first time stealing." The little beggar under him couldn't help but shout, "Little brat, you still dare to quibble." The large man glared and was about to attack again. Gu Yensui couldn't stand it anymore. He took out a few spirit beads from his sleeve and handed them to the big man. "Okay, stop fighting. This is to compensate for your loss." He had an impatient look on his face. The burly man couldn't figure out his identity. Seeing how generous he was, he weighed his options and put down the person in his hand. "Brat, you're lucky today. Since you've met a benefactor, I'll let you off," he said viciously to the little beggar before turning around and leaving. Seeing that the matter was settled, Gu Yensui turned around and left. The little beggar behind him chased after him. "Benefactor." He stopped Gu Yensui and rolled his shrewd eyes. "Benefactor saved my life. I want to repay my benefactor." Gu Yensui frowned. "I don't need you to repay me. I just happened to see it today." The little beggar was a little unwilling to forgive him. He looked at the young master who was dressed in rich clothes and was very kind. He thought that if he could follow him, at least he wouldn't have to worry about food and clothes in the future. "Send it to me at 8 o'clock. I don't have it today. I'll see if I can write more tonight and put some up in the early morning. Today is the 5th. There are 2 days left for the double monthly ticket. If you have a monthly ticket, don't forget to vote for Zhijiang. Also, don't stop voting for the recommendation tickets." Chapter 10-11. Gu Xingyin didn't say anything. She quietly looked at Gu Yensui, wanting to see how he would deal with this kind of thing. Gu Yensui refused several times, but the little beggar seemed to be determined and wanted to rely on him. But Gu Yensui was not a naive young master raised by a rich family. He roughly knew why the little beggar wanted to follow him. It was nothing more than wanting to rely on him for a future without worrying about food and clothing. But he had his master's purple heaven ring in his hand. This kind of secret, he couldn't let anyone get close to him. What's more, the little beggar didn't look like a well-behaved person. Seeing the little beggar blocking his way and not allowing him to leave, Gu Yensui's expression completely turned cold. "I can save you from the big man, so naturally I can let you return to that situation." The little beggar was stunned. He thought this young master was kind-hearted. He pretended to be pitiful and begged, and most likely he could succeed. He didn't expect this person to be so cold-hearted. Gu Yensui glanced at him. "Don't follow me anymore." Then, she walked over his body and walked past him. The little beggar didn't dare to stop him this time. He watched Gu Yensui leave. He understood that the person who saved him was different from those young masters. Gu Yensui walked forward until he couldn't see the little beggar. Then he breathed a sigh of relief. The forced indifference on his face was also removed. "Why didn't you let the little beggar follow you just now?" Gu Xingyin asked. Gu Yensui was a little confused. He thought Gu Xingyin was blaming him for being too cruel. "Master, do you think I did something wrong?" He seemed to be a little helpless. Gu Xingyin sighed. She had already found that although Gu Yensui could pretend to be an arrogant young master, he was still very insecure and even a little inferior. Especially when facing her, his attitude was always so careful that it made her heart ache. She tried her best to soften her voice. Yensui, have you forgotten what Master said? Master said that you should be responsible for your own decisions. Master just wants to ask you, why did you reject that little beggar? When Gu Yensui heard that his master had no intention of blaming him, he felt relieved. His mind was very clear to begin with. Now that he had calmed down and thought about it, he roughly understood that his master had the intention of testing him. He organized his thoughts and said slowly, first, I have the secret of the purple cloud ring and the existence of my master, so it's not suitable for anyone to know. Second, I don't think this person is very honest. He wants to follow me not because he wants to repay my kindness, but because he wants something else. Third. When he said this, he paused. Gu Xingyin was listening. Hearing him suddenly stop, she couldn't help but ask curiously, what's wrong with the third one? Gu Yensui felt that it was best not to let his master know what he was going to say next, but he did not want to lie to his master. Thus, he answered honestly, disciple actually has selfish motives. I don't want master to take a fancy to other children. This was his selfish motive. Today's days were too good. He was not willing to see his master like other children. He was not willing to see his master take a fancy to other children. A person who had never eaten candy might not have any extravagant hopes. But for a person who had eaten the most fragrant honey in the world, if he were to eat coarse sugar again, it would become a torture. Chapter 10-12. Gu Xingyin did not expect to hear such words from her little disciple. She was silent for a moment. She looked at Gu Yensui's lowered head, as if he was ready to accept her punishment at any time. Finally, she sighed. A child like this, it was really hard to be cruel to him. Yensui, don't worry. Master will not accept any other disciples. You are the most special one. She accepted this disciple under the influence of various factors. Teaching one disciple was enough to exhaust her mental and physical strength. Gu Xingyin expressed that she did not have so much time to raise another child. Gu Yensui's little face showed a happy smile because of her words. All right, don't be happy so quickly. Let's find a place to settle down first. Gu Xingyin interrupted his silly smile. The two of them rented a courtyard in Eastern Cloud City. In addition, Gu Xingyin also let Gu Yensui go to the market to buy 3 slaves. 2 of them were big and strong men, and a healthy middle-aged woman, who would be responsible for his daily life. The 3 of them had bought an irrevocable contract, which meant that after Gu Yensui bought them, all 3 of their lives would belong to him. But Gu Xingyin was not at ease with such a death contract. It was just a contract. If those people had any bad intentions, although she was confident that the other party would not be able to hurt them, it was better to be safe than sorry, right? So, on the first day of bringing the 3 of them back, Gu Xingyin once again pretended to be the mysterious guard of the young master and gave the 3 of them a fierce warning. Not only that, she also forced the 3 of them to swear a master and servant oath. In the future, if any of them had any thoughts of rebellion, the contract would immediately take effect and that person would die without a burial place. The method of a master has always been to give a carrot after a stick. Gu Xingyin was well versed in this. After the 3 of them made the oath, they received 3 low-level cultivation techniques from her. It was just a simple body forging technique. Even if one did not have the talent for cultivation, they could still practice it to strengthen their body. However, very few people were able to advance through it. In ancient times, this cultivation method was like a textbook, and everyone could learn it. But now, it was considered a lost antique. In the current cultivation world, any cultivation technique, even if it was a low-level one, was regarded as a treasure, let alone this one. At that time, the 3 of them acted as if they had received a precious treasure. They knelt down and kowtowed to Gu Yensui, without the slightest resentment of being forced to swear an oath. Gu Xingyin was generous and bought a large courtyard. Gu Yensui lived in the innermost inner courtyard, the cook lived in the east wing, and the 2 strong men lived in the outer courtyard. Gu Yensui had already made it clear that they were not allowed to enter the inner courtyard on normal days. The kitchen maids would prepare food and send it to him every day. As for the two guards, they would just watch the door when they had nothing to do. It was very easy. When the three of them were bought, they were very nervous. They did not expect the new owner to be so easy to talk to. For a moment, they were grateful to Gu Yensui. They were loyal to him. In the inner courtyard, Gu Xingyin began the process of transforming Gu Yensui's bone structure. In the cultivation world, children before the age of 10 were the best time to build a foundation. Those children from the big sects, who had good conditions, even when they were in their mother's womb, would be infused with Xiantian true qi every day to build up the bone structure of the fetus. After the fetus was born, it would be supplemented with elixirs internally and medicinal baths externally to strengthen the body, firmly building the foundation of the body. Gu Yensui's starting point was much worse than others. But it did not matter. He had a master who was in the tribulation stage, the only one in the cultivation world. Gu Xingyin was sure that in the original plot, Shi Lingxi would not be as attentive to Zhou as she was to Gu Yensui. She was Gu Xingyin's disciple. Of course, she would not be worse than anyone else. Therefore, this was a world of masters. It had been a long time since she last updated at midnight. Although it was only 2 short chapters. Gao Lingji would continue to write diligently and strive to be a diligent person who would update at midnight as soon as possible. Chapter 10-13. Gu Xingyin had to admit that some people were born to walk this path. The medicinal decoction that she made for Gu Yensui had the best effect for him at this stage and could maximize his potential. In the original plot, Shi Lingxi also made a medicinal decoction for Zhou, but it was a gentler one. There was only one reason: although this medicinal decoction was very effective, its medicinal properties were also the strongest. This also meant that when the body was soaked in it, the pain would be the most intense. Gu Xingyin had reminded Gu Yensui more than once that if he could not bear it, he must tell her. However, when Gu Yensui was soaked in the medicinal decoction for the first time, even though his face was pale and bloodless from the pain and he even fainted, he did not tell her that it was no good. Gu Yensui knew in his heart that since his master said that this was the most effective decoction, she must not have lied to him. His master was so good to him, so of course he had to do his best and not let her down. Gu Xingyin saw his persistence. She was somewhat gratified. With such an excellent aptitude and a child who could endure hardship, coupled with her guidance, there was almost no suspense about his future. She had also been paying attention to Zhou's side, and there had been no accidents. Now, the only thing that she was not sure about was her lover. She had once suspected that Gu Yensui would be her lover in this world. According to the general development of the plot, even her own feelings for this child made her feel that it should be Gu Yensui. However, he did not have the lotus fragrance that Gu Xingyin was able to confirm in the end. Perhaps, the lover in this world was someone else? Or could it be that Gu Yensui's body had something happened to him? Gu Xingyin could not get an accurate answer. She could only shake her head. She was now only left with a little spirit and was still trapped in this purple heaven ring. Her strength had been greatly reduced, and it was not convenient for her to do anything. Perhaps, he would only be able to find him after he reconstructed his physical body? She glanced at Gu Yensui. Regardless of whether this child was him or not, he was still a disciple that she acknowledged in her heart. She would teach him with all her heart until he shone brightly in this world. This time, Gu Yensui soaked in the medicinal soup for half a year. In the beginning, Gu Yensui was in so much pain that he wished he was dead. Now, he could soak in the bathtub for an hour without any change in his expression. In this half a year, Gu Xingyin did not teach him any cultivation techniques. She had told Gu Yensui directly, "Your body is too weak. The strength of your bones will determine how far you can go in the future. Only when you have a solid foundation will you have a chance to reach that supreme realm in the future." In fact, Gu Yensui didn't really understand these things. He only knew one thing, and that was that his master would never lie to him, nor would he harm him. If Gu Xingyin knew this child's thoughts, she would probably not know whether to laugh or cry. He relied on her too much. Half a year of medicinal bathing had changed Gu Yensui greatly. His skin was originally very white. Under the training of the medicinal bath, the layer of dead skin on his skin had completely shed off, and the new skin was even fairer and softer. His temperament had also undergone a huge change. If it was said that there was a trace of timidity and inferiority that came from his bones before, then now, he had truly become a noble young master that had been nurtured by the warmth of gold and jade. Gu Yensui spread out his hands and looked at his palms. There were originally some calluses that had been brought about by his poor life, but now, they were completely clean. Anyone who saw them would think that these were a pair of hands that had lived like a prince. Only he himself knew what kind of strength was contained in these seemingly weak and powerless hands. Chapter 10:14. Gu Yan was certain that the two burly men in the courtyard who were specially bought as guards were no longer a match for him. Yen Sui. The old female voice called out to him. Gu Yensui's expression suddenly became respectful. Master. Now that your body's foundation has been laid, the medicinal bath is no longer necessary. Gu Yensui's heart relaxed, and then he became happy. Does this mean that I can really start cultivating? Gu Xingyin saw his sparkling eyes and smiled helplessly in her heart. In the end, he's still a child, and his thoughts still show on his face. In the past 6 months, Gu Yensui didn't just simply soak in the medicinal bath to warm his body. Every day, Gu Xingyin would take out an hour to explain to him some common knowledge of this world and things in the cultivation world. For example, the several most powerful forces in this world, the hierarchy of cultivators, some famous young geniuses, and so on. Of course, there were also more routine things, such as teaching him how to read, and letting the cook teach him simple cooking. After all, Gu Yensui couldn't live here all the time, and those people couldn't always be by his side. Fortunately, Gu Yensui was talented and intelligent, and he learned everything very quickly. Gu Xingyin felt very relieved. There was nothing happier than having a talented disciple. There's no class today, go play in the city. Starting tomorrow, we'll move to another place to live. Gu Xingyin said to Gu Yensui. Gu Yensui nodded obediently. Gu Xingyin felt that this child should be very happy. After all, listening to the old voice talking to him for 2 hours every day, any child would feel very bored, right? But she didn't know that the 2 hours of listening to his master explain the lessons to him every day was actually what Gu Yensui looked forward to the most. No one had ever taught him so gently and patiently. Even if he said something wrong, she wouldn't scold him. Instead, she would teach him more carefully. Gu Yensui had imagined his master's appearance countless times in his mind. She was probably a kind-looking old lady with gentle eyes. Gu Xingyin, it was not Gu Yensui's fault. In order to appear more dignified, Gu Xingyin finally used the voice-changing skill that she had obtained from this world when she spoke, making her voice sound very old. That would make him seem more reliable, she thought. How could he have known that his little disciple would imagine such a scene? Gu Yensui had actually asked about his master before. At that time, Gu Xingyin just smiled faintly and replied, Master has made a contract with you. The stronger you are, the better Master's soul will recover. When you are strong enough, Master will be able to break free from the purple heaven ring's shackles and come out. Then I must become strong as soon as possible, so that Master can come out quickly. Little Gu Yensui thought naively, Master must be very uncomfortable to be trapped in a small ring, right? Gu Yensui ordered the 2 guards behind Daijin to go out. In fact, these 2 guards were not used at all, but at that time, Gu Xingyin bought them to serve as a deterrent. After all, with these 2 big and fierce men behind her, it would save her a lot of trouble. Gu Xingyin occasionally looked around the street casually. Her divine sense moved. She saw a familiar person. Chapter 10:15. Jojo. In this half a month, she was busy making plans for Gu Yensui for the next 1.5 years, so she paid less attention to Jojo. She didn't expect that she would change so much in this half a month. She saw Jojo, who was wearing a gorgeous dress, walking with a few people who looked like young masters and young ladies, with a group of people following behind her. It seemed that she was living a good life now. The people with her should be the young masters and young ladies who were favored by Qiao family. However, Gu Xingyin saw that although Jojo was smiling, there was no smile in her eyes. It was obvious that she didn't take these people and their compliments to heart. However, this was not the palace that Gu Xingyin was concerned about. She sensed devil energy on Jojo's body. Although it was very weak and almost undetectable, what kind of person was Gu Xingyin? Although her physical body was damaged, her divine sense and vision were still at the level of a strong cultivator in the tribulation stage. In terms of vision, no one could be better than her. Qiao Qiao practiced the cultivation method of the devil path. Her strength should have something to do with it. Gu Xingyin thought of the original plot, when Jojo used soul devouring on Shi Lingxi at the end. That was a long time in the future. Could it be that her change of target for taking in a disciple also caused Jojo's fate to change? Gu Xingyin was about to ask the system to check on her, when all the system's messages were transmitted to her mind. At the same time, the system sent back a message: "I'm really sorry, host, I went into hibernation these few days, so I didn't remember to inform you." Gu Xingyin didn't have time to worry about the system's hibernation. She was looking at Jojo's information. It turned out that half a month ago, Jojo had picked up a shabby jade slip in her shabby courtyard. It was precisely because the jade slip was severely damaged that the defensive array formation on it had also lost its function, allowing Jojo to take advantage of it. Inside was the inheritance left behind by a demonic cultivator at the spirit severing stage. Back then, he was besieged by the righteous cultivators and was seriously injured. He was no longer able to create a secret realm. He could only leave his cultivation experience and treasures in a jade slip in the hope of finding a fated person. He didn't know how that jade slip ended up in Jojo's small courtyard. The cultivation method of the demonic path had always been different from that of the righteous path. The demonic path did not insist on one's foundation. There were even some who entered the path through killing and evil. There were all kinds of strange things. This demonic cultivator at the soul formation stage cultivated the Tao of devouring. He forcefully seized other people's things to strengthen himself. It could be lifespan, life force, spirit root, or even destiny. In the end, it was what Jojo used on Shi Lingxi in the original plot, soul devouring. Looking at Jojo's current appearance, it was obvious that she had already reached the 7th level of Qi refining stage. In other words, she had already begun to cultivate that set of cultivation method and had already begun to plunder. Gu Xingyin only felt a burst of disgust. Forcefully taking other people's things for her own use. Under her own path of success, there were piles of other people's bones. This kind of cultivation method was really deranged. When she dreamed in the middle of the night, wouldn't she be awakened by nightmares? Jojo was absent-mindedly listening to the words of her cousin beside her. TSK, these people, when she was weak, each and every one of them looked at her like she was an ant. It was as if looking at her would dirty their eyes. But now? Her strength was stronger than theirs, but each and every one of them was chasing after her. This kind of attitude was really disgusting. Chapter 10:16. Her gaze looked around and suddenly stopped at a certain spot as her eyes lit up. That was a young master. Looking at his appearance, he should be a descendant of an aristocratic family. Behind him, there were 2 big men who looked very intimidating. But from Jojo's point of view, they were just 2 ordinary people, nothing much. Jojo's gaze at him could be considered as infatuated. Ever since she started learning that magic cultivation method, she learned a skill, and that was aura observation. Simply put, it was to see a person's innate talent or other aspects that were better than ordinary people. For example, if a person's innate talent was very good, in Jojo's eyes, she could clearly see that this person's body would emit a ball of light that was much brighter than ordinary people. Every time she found the right person, she would find those who had a little more innate talent than ordinary people. Only in this way, she would be able to gain benefits from it. At this moment, this young master, in Jojo's eyes, was simply like a small moving sun. Jojo had never seen such a bright light on anyone, including her father, the patriarch of the Qiao family. She felt that her breathing had become hurried. Such a bright white light, what did it mean? It meant that this young master had an extremely terrifying innate talent. Those so-called talented descendants of her family, compared to this person in front of her, were simply the light of fireflies. If she could get his innate talent. Jojo's gaze suddenly became fiery. Gu Yensui only felt a very intense gaze falling on his body. He frowned as he saw the source of the gaze. It was a delicate and cute-looking girl. The red mole in between her eyebrows was very conspicuous. She was looking at him without blinking. Gu Yensui knew that his appearance was good. Usually when he went out, he would also receive many startled gazes. But it was different from now. Gu Yensui had an illusion that the girl opposite him was looking at him with a passionate gaze, as if she wanted to eat him up immediately. It made people feel very uncomfortable. Seeing that Gu Yensui had discovered her, Jojo did not avoid him. Instead, she slowly smiled at Gu Yensui. Gu Yensui frowned and turned his head away. He knew it was impolite, but the other party made him feel strange. Gu Yensui might not know what was wrong, but how could Gu Xingyin not know? At this moment, her heart was burning with rage. Jojo, how dare she have designs on Gu Yensui? This was the first time such a terrifying killing intent had appeared in her heart. Even if the other party's target was herself, she would not have lost her composure. The little disciple that he had raised with his own hands was actually being coveted by others who wanted to steal his talent and take his life. How could Gu Xingyin tolerate this? She had originally planned to let it go if Jojo knew her place. She would not argue with an ordinary person who could not cultivate and would not have any interaction with her. But now, no matter what, she could not let her go. Yen Sui, let's go home after reading, she said lightly. Gu Yensui only felt that his master's voice was a little strange recently. It was colder and murderous than usual. But he just obediently replied, "Okay, master." No matter what, his master was that master. 2 more updates. See you tonight, Jojo. Where are the monthly votes? If you don't give me the monthly votes, I'll eat you. Chapter 10:17. On the way back, Gu Xingyin still felt uneasy. She couldn't help but say, that girl just now had a red mole between her eyebrows. She kept looking at you. Did you see it? Gu Yensui nodded. Gu Xingyin warned him, when you see her in the future, stay away from her. When she mentioned Xiao Qiao, her tone was cold without her noticing. Gu Yensui was a little curious. This was the first time in half a year that his master expressed displeasure to someone. He asked, "Master, why?" If it was the previous Gu Yensui, he would never ask this question. Even if he didn't know, he was used to not troubling others. So, Gu Xingyin's teaching in the past half a year was still useful. Gu Xingyin replied, "This person cultivates the devil path." Devil path? Gu Yensui was shocked. These days, under Gu Xingyin's teaching, he was no longer the little beggar who knew nothing about the cultivation world. Of course, he knew that the devil path was an extremely unpopular type of cultivator in the cultivation world. They didn't pay attention to human relations and justice. They only cared about the so-called carefree and casual nature. They even often committed murder. It was said that a few hundred years ago, many high-level cultivators in the cultivation world joined hands and began a great purge of the devil path cultivators. At that time, it was said that blood flowed like a river. Less than 1 in 10 devil path cultivators survived. Since then, their vitality was greatly damaged. They were no longer as arrogant as before. One by one, they hid in the dark to recuperate. At least until now, there were no devil path cultivators who dared to appear in the cultivation world without concealing themselves. The world's most powerful sects jointly issued an edict to kill any devil path cultivator they encountered. As for demonic Tao cultivators, in the countless legends that were left behind, they had become the epitome of evil. Gu Yensui collected his thoughts and hurriedly said, "Please rest assured, master. This disciple will definitely stay away from that person." Gu Xingyin's heart actually didn't have any special views on the so-called righteous path or demonic path. In her opinion, whether a person cultivated a righteous path or a demonic path cultivation method was not important. What was important was what he had done. Take the devil path for example. There are also those who practice the Tao of freedom. They pay particular attention to following one's heart and enjoying themselves while they can. Although it is not in line with the philosophy propagated by the righteous cultivators, they have never done anything evil. Gu Xingyin felt that her words might cause Gu Yensui to misunderstand. She didn't want her disciple to be someone who couldn't distinguish right from wrong. She said, Yen Sui, Master told you to stay away from her not because she's cultivating a demonic art, but because she's cultivating a demonic art that absorbs people's strength to strengthen herself. Gu Yensui stared blankly for a moment. At first, he didn't understand what his master meant. He repeated the words twice before he suddenly understood. He said respectfully, this disciple understands. Gu Xingyin smiled in satisfaction. Returning to the small courtyard, Gu Xingyin had Gu Yensui pack up some necessities. She then called for the 3 servants to follow her. The 4 people and 1 soul quietly left Dongyun City. But before Gu Xingyin left, she didn't forget one thing. Gu Yensui didn't know this. A day after they left Dongyun City, rumors spread all over Dongyun City that the Qiao family's 4th young Miss Jojo's strength had increased because she cultivated a demonic art. Many people believed this without a doubt. Otherwise, how could a useless person who couldn't cultivate suddenly surpass the other young masters and young misses of the Qiao family and become a Qi disciple stage 7 expert overnight? Chapter 1018. Gu Xingyin and Gu Yensui's next stop was a very remote valley. Gu Xingyin had asked the system to investigate this place. The geographical location was excellent, with mountains and water and abundant spiritual energy. The key was that the location was hidden, and almost no one had ever found it. The 3 people who followed them were very puzzled by their master's decision to come to this place. In their opinion, it was already very good to live and eat well in Dongyun City. Why would he come to such a remote place? But Gu Yensui just kept a straight face and made the 2 big men spend a day and a night building a sturdy wooden house. Okay, you can leave now, Gu Yensui said to the 3 people. The 3 people looked at each other, not understanding the meaning of his words. Gu Yensui tore the death contract into pieces in front of the 3 people. From now on, you are free. The 3 people reacted. The 2 big men were obviously a little excited. They knelt down on the spot and kowtowed 3 times to Gu Yensui. The cook seemed a little reluctant, but seeing Gu Yensui's expression, she didn't say anything. She also knelt down and kowtowed, then left. These 3 people, after walking out of the valley, would forget their memories of Gu Yensui. In the next 1.5 years, I will teach you wholeheartedly. After you are 10 years old, I will send you to the Tongtian Pavilion to study. Gu Xingyin said. Gu Yensui was a little puzzled. Master, I don't understand. You can teach me everything, so why should I go to the Tongtian Pavilion? He knew that the Tongtian Pavilion was one of the biggest forces in the cultivation world. Moreover, the Tongtian Pavilion was different from other forces. Other sects, such as the Sword Sect and the Green Cloud Sect, were all closed off. Once you entered, you became a member of that sect and couldn't leave for the rest of your life. Otherwise, you would be regarded as a traitor. The Tongtian Pavilion, on the other hand, was a place similar to a college. As long as one's age and aptitude met the requirements, they would be able to enter the Tongtian Pavilion to study until they reached a certain level. When the elders of the Tongtian Pavilion felt that they no longer needed to study there, they could leave. This was a very free place. Hearing Gu Yensui's words, Gu Xingyin smiled and said, Yen Sui, I can teach you the most profound techniques and the most efficient cultivation methods. But I can't bring you friends. In the end, I'm just one person. I can't give you what you need in the future by myself. For some reason, Gu Yensui felt a little disappointed when he heard this. In his heart, he thought that he and his master would live like this for the rest of their lives. There would only be the 2 of them. His master would teach him, and he would study diligently. He felt that this was already very good. But since his master wanted him to learn more things, he decided to go. Gu Xingyin took out a jade slip from the purple heaven ring and gave it to Gu Yensui. This is the technique that I cultivated in the past, the purple heaven art. Even in the ancient times 10,000 years ago, it was the top technique. When she said this, there was a faint trace of pride in her tone. In the current cultivation world, I dare to say that even the strongest sword sect doesn't have a cultivation technique that can compare to it. There was a reason for her to be so arrogant. It was because this purple heaven art was created by Jinghong Fairy. Gu Yensui's blood boiled when he heard his master's tone. Very good. Gu Shengyin glanced at her disciple, whose eyes seemed to be burning, and felt very satisfied. Young people should have hot blood and drive. Today's update is over. See you all in the morning. Chapter 10:19. Nightfall. Gu Yensui had already fallen asleep. There was a thin white chain in front of his chest, with a very ordinary-looking ring attached to it. This was the purple heaven ring. It was Gu Yensui's own idea to not wear it. He treasured this ring more than Gu Shengyin. He said that if he wore it on his finger and someone took a fancy to it, he wouldn't be able to protect himself. It would be troublesome. The reason why the purple heaven ring had returned to its ordinary appearance was also for the same purpose of concealment. What he didn't notice was that in this silent darkness, the ring in front of his chest was emitting a layer of purple light. Then, a very weak light flowed out from the ring, condensing into an illusory figure in the air. The illusory figure wasn't very clear. It flickered in and out of existence, and in the darkness, it was a bit strange. But if you looked at it, you wouldn't find it strange. Instead, you would be captivated by the beauty of the illusory figure. Even though you couldn't see her face clearly, just the grace she displayed with every movement was enough to make all the beauties in the world pale in comparison. The Jinghong Fairy. With the name Jinghong, how could it not be stunning? Gu Shengyin had never told Gu Yensui that she could actually come out. She just couldn't go too far from the purple heaven ring. But with her divine sense, it didn't make much of a difference to Gu Shengyin whether she could come out or not. She had only come out of the purple heaven ring on a whim. System, how is Jojo? She asked. The system gave her the most recent news. Rumors of Jojo cultivating a demonic cultivation technique have spread throughout Eastern Cloud City. The Qiao family also heard the news. They called people back to investigate carefully, but they didn't find anything. This was within Gu Shengyin's expectations. It would be strange if the Qiao family was able to find the inheritance left behind by a spirit-severing stage cultivator. And then? She was more concerned about what happened next. The Qiao family would not let them off so easily. The system's reply was very impressive. The Qiao family did not let this matter rest. Qiao's father, the Qiao family patriarch, placed her under house arrest in the courtyard and forced her to reveal the secret of her sudden increase in strength. Gu Shengyin smiled. She knew that the Qiao family was rotten to the core. They must have wanted to question Jojo for a long time, but they never found a suitable excuse. And Gu Shengyin happened to give them an excuse. That's right, Gu Shengyin didn't expect that Jojo would be able to find traces of practicing the devil path cultivation method. What happened next was also within Gu Shengyin's expectations. Jojo would never tell them what happened to her. She could only grit her teeth and say that she didn't know anything. The head of the Qiao family was also a cold-hearted person. In order to make her talk, he even tortured his own daughter. Jojo suffered a lot of inhumane torture. The last news she got was that she killed the Foundation establishment cultivator guarding her and escaped. Her whereabouts were unknown. The Qiao family is now looking for Jojo all over the city, but there's no result. Gu Shengyin asked, "Can you find her location?" The system's body lit up. "No problem." Gu Shengyin laughed. "Then you can continue to give the Qiao family a big present." Gu Shengyin said, "Even if you're just a little girl, don't blame me for bullying you." Chapter 10:20. Someone was chasing after her again. Jojo was hiding in a haystack in the backyard of a farmer's house. When she heard the sound of people outside, she gritted her teeth and dragged her battered body away again. She didn't know what was going on, but every time she moved to a different place, within 2 hours, there would be people from the Qiao family chasing after her. How could it be so coincidental that she was found so quickly every time? Jojo's heart was filled with a sense of fear. This feeling, it was as if there was an invisible eye staring at her. No matter where she was hiding, he would be able to find her at a glance. It's impossible, she comforted herself. Her body was almost numb. She was lynched in the Qiao family, so her body was already covered with all kinds of scars. These 2 days, she was so tired that she didn't have any time to recover. Some of the hideous wounds were even infected and suppurated. The burning pain kept her extremely tired mind awake. She couldn't let them catch her. This was her only belief. As long as she could escape, Jojo swore that she would repay the Qiao family well. Gu Shengyin had the system monitor Jojo's movements at all times, and slowly sat down on a chair. Although it was said to be sitting, it was actually just an action. Anyway, she didn't have a physical body now, so those things that existed were meaningless to her. Gu Yensui faintly opened his eyes when he was half asleep, and then he saw the most beautiful scene he had ever seen in his life. In the darkness, there was a glowing shadow sitting quietly beside him. He couldn't see her face, but he was inexplicably sure that this person was very beautiful. I must be dreaming, otherwise how could I see a fairy? Gu Yensui was in a daze for a moment, and then he closed his eyes again and fell asleep. He didn't know that he had lost a chance to see his master's true appearance. When Gu Yensui woke up the next day, he was still a bit confused when he looked at his surroundings. He couldn't get used to it these days, and when he woke up and saw this unfamiliar environment, he felt a bit awkward. Go and do your morning exercises when you're awake. The old voice sounded in his mind. Yes, master, he said respectfully. Turning around, he narrowed his eyes. Gu Yensui remembered the short and shocking dream last night. The fairy in his dream seemed to be sitting on this chair. He shook his head and walked out the door. Time passed quickly in the valley. As for Gu Yensui, his days were cultivation, eating, and sleeping. As for Gu Shengyin, she did even less. She watched Gu Yensui cultivate and paid attention to Jojo. Half a month later, Jojo still managed to escape from Eastern Cloud City. She seemed to have confirmed that there really was someone who could discover her whereabouts immediately. As long as she stayed in Eastern Cloud City, she would be tracked. Therefore, she turned her gaze to the outside. The Qiao family could be considered a large aristocratic family in Eastern Cloud City, but outside, no one would pay attention to them. Gu Shengyin couldn't help but admit that this girl was very smart. Her mind didn't seem like that of a teenage girl. She also silently cursed the Qiao family for being trash. Such a large family, even with someone providing them with information, they couldn't even catch a little qi condensation girl. No wonder this family didn't have a single golden core cultivator after so many years. It was their time. Chapter 1021. However, Jojo didn't gain any advantage. Her wounds hadn't been treated in half a month, and some of them were incurable. According to the system's report, her left forearm had been crippled. Once she left the city, the world outside was vast. Qiao family couldn't do anything about it. Most importantly, the Qiao family couldn't be sure if Jojo really had any secrets. The head of the Qiao family wasn't willing to go to war over an illusory secret and waste his time and energy. Gu Shengyin wanted to help, but she couldn't. She couldn't leave this place, so she couldn't do anything herself. All she could do was watch as Jojo escaped. What a great opportunity. She sighed. She told the system to keep an eye on Jojo. She focused all her attention on Gu Yensui. Compared to that girl, her disciple was much more important. Time passed quickly in the mountains. Teacher, I'm ready. The boy, who had grown a lot taller, said with a smile. If someone else was here, they would find it strange. There was no one else around the boy. Was he talking to empty air? The boy was Gu Yensui. Naturally, the person he was talking to was Gu Shengyin. Then let's go. Gu Shengyin said calmly. As Gu Yensui walked out of the valley, he looked back. This valley was still as unremarkable as ever. In his 10 years of life, apart from the rundown temple in Dongyun City, this was the place he had lived the longest. He didn't want to think about his life in that rundown temple. You don't want to leave? Gu Xingyin asked. Gu Yensui nodded without hesitation. I've already treated this place as my home with master. After all, he was only a 10-year-old child. If this was in another world, a 10-year-old child would still be acting coquettishly with his parents and asking for toys. Gu Xingyin comforted him, it doesn't matter. This place is inconspicuous and no one will notice it. If you want to in the future, you can come back and have a look. Gu Yensui nodded gently. Their target this time was the most prosperous central region of this world. The Tongtian Pavilion was located here. After walking for about half a day, they arrived at the main road. Gu Yensui spent money to follow a convoy to Tongtian City, where the Tongtian Pavilion was located. Young lord, are you going to Heaven Connect City? Judging from your age, you're also going to take the test at the Tongtian Pavilion, right? The owner of the motorcade was a very enthusiastic middle-aged man. He asked when he saw Gu Yensui. There was nothing to hide. Gu Yensui nodded. The middle-aged man laughed. Every year at this time, he would meet a large group of young people rushing to Heaven Connect City from all over the world. It was just that this person was indeed a little young. Furthermore, he didn't even have anyone following him. Although the middle-aged man was puzzled, he didn't ask. People in their line of work understood the principle of taboo the most. After all, Gu Yensui was a child. When he came out and saw so many people and heard others talking about the outside world, the sadness he felt when he just left the valley disappeared without a trace. Instead, he listened to all kinds of news with great interest. Gu Xingyin was relieved when she saw this. She began to slowly close her eyes. In the past 2 years, her soul had been completely stabilized. What could be recovered had been recovered. There was no way for her to be stronger. Unless Gu Yensui could collect the materials to build a physical body as soon as possible, she could only burst out the strength of the middle stage of the incarnation realm at most. Chapter 1022. Jojo hadn't had a good time in the past year and a half. Unlike in the original plot, with the help of Shi Lingxi, she was already a somewhat famous genius at her age. She was now hiding in a city far away from Dongyun City. After recovering from her injuries, Jojo felt that she wasn't strong enough and began to look for a new target. She didn't know why, but every time, things didn't go well for her. For example, when she took a fancy to a person's talent, she approached that person for a long time. Finally, one day, when no one was around and she was about to make a move, that person's father came. After that, that person's father looked at her very warily. After making sure that his child was fine, he hurriedly took her back. From then on, that person would always have someone by his side, making it impossible for her to find a chance to make a move. Once, twice, thrice, it was the same every time. Jojo didn't know if it was because she angered the heavens that her luck became so bad. She couldn't steal other people's luck, so she could only slowly cultivate on her own. But her own talent was terrible to the extreme. A year and a half ago, she was already at the 7th level of qi refining. After so long, she was still at the 7th level of qi refining. Gu Xingyin silently gave the system a thumbs up. Well done. If a person was used to the speed of a plane, they definitely wouldn't be able to take a tricycle every day. That kind of huge disparity could even drive a person with poor mental fortitude crazy. Gu Xingyin wanted to make her feel aggrieved and helpless. She had never been a magnanimous person. Since Jojo dared to have thoughts about Gu Yensui, she couldn't blame her for torturing her for the rest of her life. On the way to Tongtian City, Gu Yensui didn't encounter any robbers, damsel in distress, natural disasters, or other plot points that often appeared in stories. He arrived at his destination very smoothly. He arrived at the right time. The Tongtian Pavilion's enrollment would last for a month, and tomorrow was the first day. Although it was the first day, when Gu Yensui woke up early in the morning and arrived at his destination, he found that there was already a long line in front of him. So early, Gu Yensui exclaimed. Gu Xingyin estimated the length of the line and decisively said to Gu Yensui, who hadn't had time to eat breakfast, "Don't worry. Go eat a bowl of noodles and buy some dry food." Gu Yensui instantly understood what his master meant. He glanced at the long queue and very consciously listened to Gu Xingyin's words. When he finished eating and came back, he found that the line had grown by a lot. Gu Yensui stood at the back of the queue, slowly lining up. Cultivators had very good eyesight. Even though they were far away, Gu Yensui could still see the situation in front of him clearly. On the left side of the team, there was a huge transparent roulette. The roulette was huge. It was almost as tall as an adult and as wide as two bodies. He watched as the person in front of the group walked to the side and placed his right hand on it. After that, the transparent roulette emitted a burst of light, and red words appeared on it: Zhang Sheng, age, 13. Root bone, yellow rank, low grade. Cultivation. Qi refining, 6th level. Unqualified. Gu Yensui's eyes widened. He had never seen such a magical thing. Gu Xingyin thought that he was worried and comforted him. "Don't worry. With your talent, the Tongtian Pavilion will probably ask you to enter. 4:00 in the morning. I want to become a branch at 8:00 in the morning as soon as possible. Will Gu Yensui, give me the ticket, and I will tell you what will happen later." Chapter 10:23. Gu Yensui nodded and smiled. "Master, I'm not worried. After all, I'm Master's disciple. How can I be worse than others?" The youth smiled faintly and stood at the side. He had a charm that others could not compare to. Just as the two of them expected, after 4 hours of this test, there was still a small group of people standing in front of Gu Yensui. Gu Yensui had been paying attention to the situation in front of him. Most of the people were of the yellow rank and were eliminated without hesitation. After all, the Tongtian Pavilion was a famous force in the cultivation world. Naturally, the requirements for accepting disciples were not low. Other than the age requirement of 10 to 15 years old, the most important thing was talent. At the very least, one had to be of the low class of the black rank to be accepted by the Tongtian Pavilion. As for strength, this was secondary. In the entire morning, hundreds or even thousands of people had been tested. Among the 100 people who were eliminated, the majority of the people who were in the mystic stage were in the yellow stage. They ranged from the low class of the black rank to the high class of the black rank. As for the youths with the earth rank talent, they could be called geniuses. Gu Yensui saw very clearly that among the 100 people, there were only 4 people with earth rank talent. As for the heaven rank talent, there was no one at all. "Master." Gu Yensui called out to Gu Xingyin. "What's wrong?" Gu Yensui asked somewhat embarrassedly. "This disciple doesn't know what rank my talent is?" "This." Gu Xingyin was speechless for a moment. Gu Yensui's talent was good. There was no doubt about this. However, Gu Xingyin did not have a physical body now and did not have a spirit tool to test one's constitution. It was really difficult for her to give a specific number. When she first met Gu Yensui, she could only vaguely confirm that his aptitude was at least earth rank upper level or above. Later on, after using a secret technique to upgrade his aptitude, Gu Xingyin was certain that Gu Yensui's aptitude was definitely in the heaven rank. However, the level of the heaven rank depended on Gu Yensui's potential. However, looking at Gu Yensui's cultivation speed in the past year and a half, Gu Xingyin had a vague guess. She could say that she was also very curious about what kind of aptitude her little disciple would have later. No, of course he couldn't say this out loud. After all, she was an extremely mysterious and omnipotent master. Gu Xingyin coughed dryly and said, "Don't worry, Yen Sui. You only need to know that no one here can compare to your talent." She wasn't lying. In today's era, the aptitude of heaven rank had already become a legend. At least, among all the youths present, Gu Xingyin's divine sense swept over them. None of them made her eyes light up. Gu Yensui didn't hear the answer he wanted and was a little disappointed. However, looking at the people in front of him, his heart suddenly became cheerful. Anyway, it would be his turn soon. When the sun above his head moved from the east to the center and shone down vertically, it was finally Gu Yensui's turn. The cultivator in charge of the test looked at Gu Yensui and his eyes lit up. This young man didn't look very old, but his eyebrows were exquisite and handsome, and the corners of his mouth had a very pleasant smile, which made his face look especially gentle. "Please put your hand on the test roulette," he said. Gu Yensui was a little nervous. He took a deep breath and slowly put his right hand on the transparent roulette. In an instant, a light that seemed to be able to compete with the sun above his head burst out from the roulette. Chapter 10:24. The tester couldn't help but close his eyes. He hid the shock that rose in his heart and looked at the child in the white light. What kind of shocking talent was this to make the testing stone emit such a light? Gu Xingyin, who was hidden in the violet heaven ring, frowned. She had clearly sensed that the moment the testing stone lit up, a terrifying aura suddenly erupted from several places. It seemed that many people had already noticed Yen Sui. The white light dissipated, and everyone looked at the large red words on the testing roulette in shock. After a long time, the tester gulped and reported the data displayed on it. Gu Yensui, age, 10 years old. Root bone, high-grade heaven stage. Cultivation, Qi refinement, peak. Qualified. He looked at the roulette again in disbelief to make sure that he hadn't missed the words on it. High-grade heaven stage aptitude. How many years had it been since someone with such aptitude appeared in the entire cultivation world, let alone in the Tongtian Pavilion? When the peerless genius of the Sword Sect, who was known as the #1 person in the younger generation, was tested to have a medium-grade heaven stage aptitude, the entire Sword Sect had even sent out invitations. The Sword Sect's Supreme Elder, who had been in seclusion for many years, had also personally come out and accepted this disciple. It was said that with such a genius in the Sword Sect, they would definitely suppress the other forces in the next few hundred years. But now, a disciple with a high-grade heaven stage aptitude had appeared in the Tongtian Pavilion. The tester forcefully suppressed the excitement in his heart and tried his best to make his stiff face reveal a smile. He said to Gu Yensui very politely, "Please wait over there for a while. There will be a person in charge to lead you later." Compared to the excitement of the others, Gu Yensui was much calmer. He politely thanked the tester before walking towards the hundreds of boys and girls who had passed the test. His indifferent appearance made the few people in the dark nod secretly. Not only was his root bone rare, but his temperament was also extremely good. Little did he know that the reason why Gu Yensui was so calm was because he really didn't think that his aptitude was that good. Because his master often talked to him about how powerful a certain genius was in her previous era. When he was 18 years old, he created his own cultivation technique. When he was 17 years old, he entered the golden core stage. Under such circumstances, even though Gu Xingyin kept saying that her disciple was the best, Gu Yensui did not have the confidence that he was better than those geniuses. He already knew that those people existed today, but he didn't know that all of them were the most amazing people in the best cultivation era 10,000 years ago. Among them was the Jingheng fairy, Shi Lingxi. Gu Yensui had just walked over, but before he could find a good spot, a few figures suddenly appeared in front of him. Startled, he stared wide-eyed at the old men in front of him who were smiling benevolently. "Gu Yensui, is it? This old man is an elder of the Green Cloud sect. Are you willing to join my Green Cloud sect? This old man promises to provide you with the best cultivation materials and nurture you as a core disciple. Don't listen to him. Our Great Void sect's Grand Elder hasn't accepted a disciple yet." A powerful aura surged from behind them. "You shameless old fogies. How dare you come to my Tongtian Pavilion's territory to snatch people?" An angry shout sounded from afar. Chapter 10:25. An old man with fiery red hair and beard came in front of them angrily. He reached out his hand and pushed Gu Yensui behind him. "Two old men from the Green Cloud sect and the Great Void sect, your actions are really fast." The Green Cloud sect's elder smiled insincerely as he stroked his beard. "Such a good seedling, anyone who sees it will be moved. Your mother's fart. Good seedling? Then he is also a good seedling of my Tongtian Pavilion," the red-haired old man said with a glare. The Great Void Sex Elder also came out and said with a smile, Tongtian Pavilion Master, what kind of joke are you talking about? This little friend hasn't officially entered your Tongtian Pavilion yet, right? The red-haired old man sneered. He specially came to participate in my Tongtian Pavilion's test. If he wanted to go to your place, he would have gone long ago. The elder of the Green Cloud sect simply ignored the red-haired old man. He only smiled and looked at Gu Yensui, who was behind the master of the sky-piercing pavilion. Little friend, about my proposal just now, the Tongtian Pavilion master unceremoniously swept out his palm, carrying an earth-shattering power that directly swept towards the two people. The two elders of the Great Void sect and the Green Cloud sect hurriedly dodged. In terms of strength, the Tongtian Pavilion master was indeed better than the two of them. Qi Shao, are you serious? The Tongtian Pavilion master sneered. The two of you dare to come to my Tongtian Pavilion's territory and kidnap someone. Could it be that you're just joking? Gu Yensui quietly watched the three top experts deal with each other. The Great Void Sex Elder saw the situation and said loudly, why don't we ask this little friend's opinion and see which pavilion he wants to go to? Qi Shao raised his hand and sent a palm over. Nothing. He is a disciple of my Tongtian Pavilion. You two old men, where did you come from? Go back to where you came from. Gu Xingyin watched the show and sighed in his mind, the current cultivation world is really declining. How can they do such a shameless thing as snatching other people's disciples? Yen Sui, don't be deceived by those two. Although this Cyan Cloud sect and the Great Void sect are big sects, their reputation outside is not very good. The owner of the Tongtian Pavilion, on the other hand, has a pretty good temper. Gu Yensui silently glanced at the Tongtian Pavilion master, who had already taken out his natal spiritual weapon. In his heart, he did not quite understand what his master's definition of good temper was. In the end, this was the Tongtian Pavilion's territory. The two men argued for a while, but they knew it was hopeless and could only leave with their tails between their legs. After this incident, in order to prevent any more accidents, the Tongtian Pavilion owner immediately brought Gu Yensui back. Are you willing to be my disciple? The Tongtian Pavilion owner did not act coy. He had observed this child for a long time and felt that this child's talent and temper were quite to his liking. It was rare for him to have the thought of accepting a disciple. Gu Yensui shook his head. The Tongtian Pavilion owner glared. He felt that his appearance might be too fierce and was afraid of scaring the child. He tried his best to make his face appear a bit gentler. In this cultivation world, there are thousands of people who want to be my disciple. You're actually not willing? Can you tell me why? The Tongtian Pavilion owner swallowed the word father with difficulty. I have to maintain my image, he silently said in his heart. Little did he know that in the fight just now, in the eyes of this year's new students, he, the pavilion master, did not have the image of an expert to speak of. Gu Yensui said softly, Junior already has a master. Hearing this, the Tongtian Pavilion owner also gave up on the idea. Although he was excited to see someone, he could not do something like snatching another person's disciple. Chapter 1026. When it came to Gu Yensui, the sky-reaching pavilion did not give him any special treatment. Compared to the core disciple treatment promised by the two elders of the Great Void sect and the Green Cloud sect, the Tongtian Pavilion only treated him as an ordinary student. And this was exactly what Gu Yensui needed. What he needed to learn was mainly some basic knowledge. As for the more profound problems in cultivation, Gu Xingyin would naturally be the one to teach him. With the help of a great teacher and his own talent and comprehension, Gu Yensui's speed of improvement could be said to be terrifying. In the first year of entering the Tongtian Pavilion, he successfully broke through to the foundation establishment stage. An 11-year-old foundation establishment cultivator was not unprecedented, but he was the first person in this era. Even Huan Chu, who was known as the #1 person of the younger generation in the Sword sect, was already 14 when he broke through to the foundation establishment stage. However, all of this was not over. At 13, he smoothly advanced from the early stage of the foundation establishment stage to the middle stage of the foundation establishment stage. Then, In just a short year, he broke through from the middle stage of the foundation establishment stage to the late stage of the foundation establishment stage. At 14, when most people were still working hard to break through to the foundation establishment stage, he had already begun to set his sights on the golden core stage. Another year, he completed the foundation establishment stage. The disciples who entered the Tongtian pavilion with him were already used to this monster's extraordinary speed of advancement. Originally, there were a few disciples with good talent in their batch. If placed in other places, they would be considered rare geniuses. However, there was no harm without comparison. Under Gu Yensui's radiance, his peers in the Tongtian pavilion paled in comparison. At first, those people were unconvinced, jealous, and even isolated Gu Yensui. However, later on, when the gap between them became bigger and bigger, and they were even in a completely different world, they gave up. No matter how hard they worked, their improvement was maintained at the level of an ordinary genius. However, Gu Yensui, he was not human at all. These words were definitely not meant to be scolding. It was just that his cultivation speed was really too monstrous. From unconvinced to jealous, to convinced, and finally to worship. Gu Yensui had never said a word. He had used his own strength to prove that he was capable. Senior Brother Gu. Greetings, Senior Brother Gu. Gu Yensui had not been in the Tongtian pavilion for the longest time, but the Tongtian pavilion valued seniority based on cultivation. Whoever was stronger would be the senior brother. Therefore, even though Gu Yensui was only 15 years old, and there were many disciples in the Tongtian pavilion who were older than him, he was already the senior brother of the majority of the people in the pavilion. Two girls blushed as they looked at the side of his face, their hearts thumping. Senior Brother Gu. Not only was he talented, he was also good-looking and had a gentle personality. There was once a disciple of the Tongtian pavilion who was bored and held a poll in private to vote for the number one beauty of the Tongtian pavilion. That person wanted to vote for the number one beauty, but he forgot about Gu Yensui, this great killer, and forgot to add a gender. Therefore, when the results came out, he looked at the name Gu Yensui, who had the highest number of votes and was more than 1,000 votes ahead of the second place. He wanted to cry but had no tears. He knew that Senior Brother Gu was good-looking, but, heavens above, he really did not mean anything else. If Senior Brother Gu knew about this, he would tear him apart alive. Gu Yensui took out a book, but his mind was not on it. Master, I heard a piece of news. 10 days later, there will be an auction in Tongtian City. It is said that there will be earth fire spirit essence inside. Earth fire spirit essence? Gu Xingyin became spirited when she heard this. That was a crucial material for refining the body. I need to hurry up and make my appearance. I am famous because of my beauty, I am famous because of my beauty. That's right, Gao Lingji was such a superficial dog. Then, I don't know if you guys saw the number one person of the sword sect, Huan Chu, who only appeared once. That's right, I want my gay friend, Lang Chu. Ah no, Huan Chu. Cameo as a friend. Her fast-forward article, Fast Forward System, a guide for male gods, is currently being serialized. Don't miss out on a babe who likes fast forward. Finally, the number of votes you have is how high my beauty is. Chapter 1027. Gu Yensui smiled. After so many years, he had never forgotten that he had promised his master to help her reconstruct her body. He had also never forgotten who he had relied on to achieve what he had today. It could be said that without his master, he would not be who he was today. Gu Xingyin was very happy. Many materials were needed to reconstruct a body. But most of them were common herbs. With Gu Yensui's current status and the wealth in Gu Xingyin's purple heaven ring, it was not difficult to get them. The key was a few rare herbs. The first was the earthly fire spiritual milk. The earthly fire spiritual milk had mild medicinal properties and was mainly used to neutralize the medicinal properties of various herbs and fuse them together. As for the remaining three, they could only be found by chance. One was the 1,000-year-old lantern heart lotus seed. The lantern heart lotus seed came from the lantern heart lotus. The lantern heart lotus seed was a very rare high-level herb and a very precious alchemy material. It was often fought over once it appeared, not to mention the 1,000-year-old lantern heart lotus seed. It was very likely that one would only appear once every few decades. 10,000-year-old frost chalcedony. Gu Xingyin was not worried about this. She just happened to have such a thing in her purple heaven ring. And the last one was the most difficult. The blood of the demonic beast, Crimson Fire Qilin. Not to mention whether the Crimson Fire Qilin really existed, even if it did, a demonic beast of this level was like a king among the demonic beasts. It would not be easy to get its blood. Gu Xingyin had already prepared herself for a long time. Anyway, a cultivator had a long lifespan, so she was not in a hurry. It would be good if she could find something. She would take it slow. With Shi Lingxi as protagonist luck, she believed that she would be able to gather these things sooner or later. 10 days later, at the auction in Heaven Connect City. As one of the largest cities in this area, auctions in Heaven Connect City were not rare. Sometimes, they would even be held several times in a month. But today's auction was different. The largest auction house in Heaven Connect City, the Spirit Treasure Auction House, was known to hold an auction every 6 months. There was definitely not a single ordinary item. Although their tone was indeed very arrogant, the quality was really impeccable. Gu Yensui arrived early. After putting on a special black cloak, he entered the auction house in a low-key manner. The auction began as scheduled, and the first item was a very powerful offensive spiritual weapon. The surrounding atmosphere was very hot, but Gu Yensui sat still. His only goal today was the Earth Fire spiritual elixir. He didn't have any other thoughts about these things. Soon, the Earth Flame spiritual elixir appeared in the hands of the auctioneer. Esteemed guests, what appears in my hands next is an extremely rare material, Earth Fire spiritual essence. As for its effects, please take a look at our shadow recording stone. Above the auctioneer's head, there was a huge transparent screen made of photographic stone. On it, someone was explaining in detail the effects of the Earth Fire spirit essence. When the auctioneer estimated that the guests had finished watching, he began to bid. Rare alchemy material, Earth Fire spirit milk. The starting price is 10,000 mid-grade spirit stones. 10,000 mid-grade spiritual stones were equivalent to 100 high-grade spiritual stones and 100,000 low-grade spiritual stones. This price, compared to the value of the Earth Fire spirit milk, was not low. After all, although the Earth Fire spirit milk was rare, there were many heavenly treasures more precious than it. Someone had already begun to bid. 11,000 mid-grade spiritual stones. Immediately, someone followed suit. 12,000. Gu Yensui's hands under the cloak slowly rubbed. No matter what, this Earth Fire spirit milk was mine. Chapter 1028. All kinds of bids rose and fell one after another. Then, a voice as clear as water rang out in the auction house, 200 upper-grade spirit stones. The voice was extremely clear, like the sound of the clearest stream in the mountains gurgling. However, the people present did not care about this. Someone was willing to spend 200 upper-grade spirit stones to buy a Earth Fire spiritual elixir. Although according to the conversion, 200 upper-grade spirit stones were equivalent to 20,000 middle-grade spirit stones, and the bidding just now was close to this amount. However, 20,000 middle-grade spirit stones and 200 upper-grade spirit stones were completely different concepts. High-grade spirit stones were very scarce nowadays, although the conversion rate was 100 to middle-grade spirit stones. However, everyone knew that no fool would exchange one upper-grade spirit stone for 100 middle-grade spirit stones. As soon as Gu Yensui said this, the auction house quieted down. There was even someone who called out a price of 25,000 middle-grade spirit stones. After inquiring the owner of the Earth Fire spiritual elixir, that person sold it to Gu Yensui for 200 upper-grade spirit stones. The auctioneer was obviously very happy. The higher the value of the auction item, the more commission he could get. Gu Yensui could sense that there were many inquisitive gazes on him. He did not care at all. The cloak in this auction house was specially made and could block all divine sense probing. When the time came, who would know who he was when he entered and left? On the contrary, after getting the earth fire spiritual elixir, his mood was a little excited. With it, the hope of his master's body being reconstructed was a little higher. Many people were paying attention to him, but Gu Yensui did not make any more bids after that. Many people saw that he did not intend to compete with them, so they stopped paying attention. Gu Yensui took off his disguise and walked out of the auction house. Not long after he walked out, he found that he was being watched. Because this auction house occupied a large area, it was not in Heaven Connect City. At this moment, the place Gu Yensui passed by was an extremely rare grassland. Clearly, the other party had come prepared. Gu Xingyin had long discovered the whereabouts of these people. She did not warn Gu Yensui because she could tell that the cultivation of these two people was not high. They were also in the foundation establishment stage, which was a good opportunity for Gu Yensui to practice. Young master, we brothers have been eyeing you for a long time. We know that you just bought something good at the auction, so we won't be greedy. Just give us half of the things in your storage ring. How about it? Was this not being greedy? Gu Yensui was so angry that he laughed. The two of them had chosen him as their target because he was young and handsome. His face had always been gentle, and they could tell that he had a soft personality. They weren't novices, so they could naturally tell that Gu Yensui's cultivation level was slightly higher than theirs. But disciples of aristocratic families like them were obviously treasured by their families. They might not even have seen blood before, so how could they fight against the two of them? In their hearts, Gu Yensui was already meat on the chopping board. Half of the things in his storage ring? Gu Yensui's storage ring was the purple heaven ring. How could he agree? There was no doubt that the two sides had a conflict. The two of them had kicked an iron plate this time. Under Gu Xingyin's guidance, how could Gu Yensui lack actual combat experience? In less than 10 minutes, two people were lying in front of Gu Yensui. There were no visible wounds on the two of them, but their faces were pale and their brows were tightly knitted. Their bodies twitched from time to time, indicating that they were not as fine as they looked. They looked at Gu Yensui with some shock. They did not expect that this youth, who looked as beautiful as a girl, would be so ruthless. Chapter 1029. Gu Yensui still had that gentle appearance, but the words he said to them were not so gentle. Leave your storage pouches. The two stared with wide eyes, as if they didn't expect this young master who didn't seem to lack money at all to say such words. Gu Yensui saw that they didn't move, but he didn't get angry, but the words he said made the two feel even more cold. Since I was young, my master taught me to give you a taste of your own medicine. You want my storage pouch, so I'll let you use your own storage pouches as collateral. If you don't want to, then leave behind a hand. When he said this, his expression was very calm, as if saying, leave behind a hand, was as simple as blinking an eye. The two looked at him in shock, and after realizing that he wasn't joking, they compared the difference in strength between the two sides, and finally unwillingly reached out and took the things from their waists. They didn't expect to go for wool and come home shorn. Fortunately, in their line of work, they understood the principle of a crafty rabbit having 3 burrows. They couldn't put all their belongings in one place. Although it was painful, it wasn't to the extent that they couldn't bear it. Gu Yan watched the two of them leave with a smile on his face. His expression finally changed when the two of them disappeared from sight. His originally rosy face suddenly became pale, and finally, he couldn't help but spit out a mouthful of bright red blood. He didn't notice it, and even Gu Xingyin didn't notice it, but in the blood, there seemed to be a flash of gold. Just as he spat out a mouthful of blood, a middle-aged man in a black robe who was quite far away from here had a serious expression on his face. After sniffing twice with the tip of his nose, he dashed toward the place where the two of them were. Yen Sui, how are you? Gu Xingyin was a bit worried. Gu Yensui wiped the corner of his mouth, afraid that his master would be worried, and shook his head. It's not a very serious injury. After all, there were two people. Although he had the upper hand, it wasn't as easy as it looked. He was injured after all. Gu Xingyin said, then let's leave here first, and when we return to the Tongtian pavilion. Before she finished speaking, her expression changed. Yen Sui, hurry, and leave here. Gu Yensui did not understand why his tone had suddenly become so urgent, but he did not hesitate at all. He withdrew his hand and put the 2 storage pouches on the ground into his ring before shooting off in the direction of Heaven's Connect City. But he was still too slow. A black figure quietly stood in his path. It was a middle-aged man in a black robe. His hair was short, each strand like thorns on the top of his head. Gu Yensui did not know if it was his illusion, but he felt that he saw a green light in his eyes. How could the eyes of a normal cultivator emit green light? The more he looked at Gu's, the more he asked, "You? Who are your parents?" Gu Yensui looked at him with some vigilance. "Why are you asking this?" He originally planned to leave directly, but there was a faint pressure in the air, and he found that he couldn't move. The middle-aged man took a sniff, and an intoxicated expression appeared on his face. "What a sweet smell. Yours must be very pure. Let me guess, which lord's descendant are you?" Gu Yensui had a strange feeling in his heart. This man's words seemed to have something to do with his origins. Chapter 1030. But looking at his appearance, he didn't seem to have any good intentions towards him. He said coldly, "I don't know what you want to say. I want to leave now." A strange smile appeared on the man's face. "Leave? No, no, no. How can I let such a pure blood tonic leave? As long as I eat you, my strength will greatly increase." Gu Xingyin's heart was heavy. If she wasn't wrong, this man wasn't human at all, but a demon. His strength couldn't be underestimated. A demon cultivator at the incarnation stage was already considered a top expert in this world. Could it be that Yen Sui's background was actually related to the demon race? Now wasn't the time to investigate this. The key was to escape quickly. The man seemed to be unable to bear it. He spread his hands, and a huge black figure appeared behind him. It looked like a giant wolf, roaring and pouncing towards Gu Yensui. Gu Yensui couldn't move at all. That man was too strong. He looked on helplessly as the black wolf pounced towards him. He could even see its white teeth about to bite his neck. At this moment, he was thinking, what a pity. It wasn't easy to find the earth fire spiritual essence for Master. However, the black wolf stopped in front of him. It was as if he was frozen in place by some kind of power. Even the saliva flowing out from the corner of his mouth was frozen in midair. "How dare you bully my disciple in front of me? Who gave you the guts?" A cold and murderous voice sounded from behind him. At the same time, a cold palm touched his shoulder. "Master?" Gu Yensui was shocked. He found that he could move and subconsciously turned back. Then, he saw the most beautiful scene in his life. Behind him, the white-clothed, ink-haired woman stood quietly. Her face was very pale, so pale that it was almost transparent. However, this didn't detract from her beauty and charm. There was a red dot between her eyebrows, as if it wanted to steal the beauty of heaven and earth. "Master, she. So this is what she looks like." Gu Yensui stood there in a daze, his mind in a daze. He had always known that he was good-looking. He had also heard countless times from others that he had a beautiful face that was even more exquisite and beautiful than a woman. He had never felt anything when he looked at his own face. He had always felt that beauty and bones were nothing more than an illusion. But today was different. Looking at this kind of master, he completely understood why in those stories, there were kings who did not want their country, only to win the smile of a beauty. Because there really was such a beauty that was worth it for you to do everything for her. Gu Xingyin's other hand flashed with purple light. Her delicate and beautiful hand clenched lightly, and the huge black wolf illusion shattered like a bubble in front of the two of them. The black-robed man's pupils shrank. He actually couldn't see through this woman's strength. Even the most powerful lord of the demon race had never given him such a feeling. This woman was not to be trifled with. He forced a smile and said, "Senior, this is all a misunderstanding." "Misunderstanding?" Gu Xingyin smiled coldly. She stretched out her hand, and purple light flashed in her hand. A huge illusion of a palm seemed to come from the sky, and directly hit the black-robed man. Cold sweat dripped down the black-robed man's forehead. He found that he couldn't avoid it. Bang! The huge palm fell, splashing smoke and dust on the ground. Wei-yin, after holding back for so long, it's finally my turn to show off. She raised her eyebrows and looked over coldly. You who are watching the show over there, hurry up and hand over your tickets. See you tomorrow. Chapter 1031. When everything dissipated, the place where the black-robed man had been was already empty. Gu Yensui looked at the slender and delicate woman behind him with some shock. Master, that person just now? Gu Xingyin said indifferently, how could a little guy in the soul formation stage escape from my hands? Did she mean that the man was dead? Gu Yensui looked at the strange master in front of him, as if he had a lot of questions to ask, but didn't know how to start. Gu Xingyin's figure became more and more illusory. Her face became more transparent, and she said hurriedly, Yensui, leave here quickly. My attack just now has attracted a lot of attention, I'm afraid there will be trouble later. Then, Gu Yensui saw his master's figure slowly fade until it disappeared without a trace. For no reason, a trace of panic flashed through his heart. He didn't dare to delay, and used all his strength to fly in the direction of Heaven Connect City. Along the way, his consciousness kept calling out to the purple heaven ring. Master? Master, are you still there? His master, who had always answered his questions, didn't answer him at this moment. Gu Yensui's heart became more and more flustered. Just as he didn't know what to do, there was finally some movement in the purple heaven ring. Don't shout, I'm fine, I just used too much energy. Gu Xingyin's weak voice came out. This time, it was no longer the old voice, but an extremely clear and pleasant female voice. Gu Xingyin thought that since he had seen her appearance, there was no need to fake a voice. Gu Yensui's ears went limp. Master? Gu Xingyin said softly, and then said, I may have to sleep well for a while, don't worry, I'm fine. Then, no matter how Gu Yensui called out, there was no sound from the ring. Gu Yensui tried his best to calm his mind, and quickly flew in the direction of Heaven Connect City. Gu Xingyin was right. Not long after they left, several figures arrived. At this moment, they were all looking at the marks on the ground in shock. This. Annihilating a divine transformation stage cultivator with one move. When did such a powerful cultivator appear in the world of cultivation? Could it be that some old monster had come out of seclusion? On the other hand, the demon race was shocked by another piece of news. Are you serious? Did you find the bloodline left behind by Master? An old man with white hair and a beard asked with a burning gaze. In a small city far away from Eastern Cloud City, a young girl with a red mole between her eyebrows silently signed a contract with a demon elder, becoming his dual cultivation furnace. While Gu Xingyin was sleeping, the atmosphere of the entire cultivation world seemed to be tense. In the Tongtian Pavilion, many disciples noticed that their senior brother Gu seemed to have changed. In the Tongtian Pavilion, Gu Yensui was famous for his hard work in cultivation, but now they realized that this was far from Gu Yensui's limit. It was almost impossible to find him outside of the cultivation room. Many people sighed with emotion. No wonder senior brother Gu improved so quickly. Not only was his talent so good, but even his cultivation was so much harder than the average person. They weren't afraid of others being more talented than you, but they were more talented than you, and more hardworking than you. Really, even if they wanted to be jealous, they didn't know where to start. No one knew how much pressure Gu Yensui was under. After seeing his master and the black-robed man's moves, he realized that he had thought himself to be good in the past, but he was just a frog at the bottom of a well. Chapter 1032. In his master's eyes, even an expert in the divine transformation stage was just a little guy. In that case, his strength, which was not even at the golden core stage, was not even comparable to an ant in her eyes? She could kill an expert in the divine transformation stage with one strike even in her soul state. How terrifying was his master's true strength? Needless to say, recently, Gu Yensui had always felt that someone was secretly watching him. He had investigated several times, but he had never found the source. However, he was sure that someone was really watching him. Regardless of whether this person had any ill intentions, the feeling of being watched at all times was really not good. After all these things, Gu Yensue's fighting spirit was ignited in his heart. He wanted to become stronger. As long as he was strong enough, he would find out what he wanted to know one day. Those people who could easily take his life now, he would eventually surpass them. He would no longer need his master to take the risk of overexerting herself and eventually falling into a deep sleep to save him. Gu Yensui did not know that his pupils had turned into dark golden vertical pupils without him noticing. It was as if he was some kind of cold demon beast. When Gu Xingyin woke up, she received a series of messages from the system. She glanced through 10 lines at a glance and only felt mentally tired. Ignoring the unimportant messages, there were mainly 3 things that she needed to pay attention to. First, her mission target, Jojo, seemed to have given up on the path of plundering other people's talents after countless failures. Instead, she signed a furnace contract with a powerful demonic cultivator in the divine transformation stage. This was because she had been discovered to have the rare extreme Yin body, a top-grade furnace constitution. Second, there seemed to be many people investigating her disciple recently. The key point was that those people were basically from the demon clan, and their standpoints were very clear. Gu Yensue's background did not seem to be as simple as she thought. The third was her precious disciple, Gu Yensui. Ever since she fell into a coma, he had been desperately cultivating. Looking at him, it was already very lucky that he did not go crazy. To Gu Xingyin, her disciple was naturally the most important. Did this child become like this without anyone to look after him? If he really went berserk, then all these years of cultivation would have been wasted. Gu Yensui. Gu Yensui was in the middle of his cultivation when an angry voice suddenly appeared in his mind. He was stunned for a moment before he realized that this was his master. What followed was ecstasy. He couldn't help but smile. "Master, you're awake?" Gu Xingyin felt even more annoyed when she saw that he had completely ignored her tone. In a flash, she appeared on the mahogany chair in front of Gu Yensui. A pair of beautiful eyes stared at him coldly. "Is this how I taught you to cultivate? Immersing yourself in cultivation 24 hours a day, even disregarding your body, has it really increased your cultivation speed by a lot?" Only then did Gu Yensui realize that his master seemed to be angry. Then, he realized that his master had called him by his full name just now. This meant that she was really angry. No matter what, it was his fault that he had made his master angry. Gu Yensui obediently lowered his head and admitted his mistake. This disciple knows his mistake. Gu Xingyin was still angry and did not reply. Gu Yensui looked up and said in a low voice, "This disciple just remembered that it was this disciple's incompetence that caused Master to be so tired. I feel ashamed." Chapter 1033. As long as he showed such a look, his master would not be able to be ruthless. Gu Yensui had his own little tricks, although what he said was indeed the truth. Sure enough, looking young and beautiful, Gu Xingyin's heart suddenly softened when her little disciple showed such a look. After all, he was a child she had watched grow up with her own eyes. She could be ruthless to anyone but him. She sighed. "Oh, you. With your talent, if you slowly cultivate under my guidance, I can guarantee that you will stand at the peak of the cultivation world in less than 50 years. Gu Yensui did not speak, but silently said in his heart, "But for me, 50 years is really too long." His life was only more than 10 years in total. He did not know what changes would happen in 50 years, and he did not want his master to stand in front of him every time he encountered danger. He hoped that he could be the man who could protect his master, but obviously, she did not need it. And he did not have that strength. "I'll say it first. If I see you secretly practicing during your rest time, don't blame me for not having you as my disciple," Gu Xingyin said ruthlessly. She knew how to say it to make this disciple really remember her words in his heart. Gu Yensui's eyelashes trembled. Obviously, he did not expect his master to say this. He raised his head and blinked his eyes at the white shadow sitting on the mahogany. The other party's sitting posture was quite casual, but it did not affect her aura at all. She sat so simply, but Gu Yensui felt that the other party made his ordinary room feel like a palace. By the way, Gu Xingyin thought of something and said, "Go out less these days and stay in the Tongtian pavilion as much as possible. There seems to be someone outside who has designs on you. Master also knows?" Gu Yensui did not intend to tell his master about this matter, because he did not want her to worry. He did not expect that his master, who had just woken up from a deep sleep, would also know about this matter. He nodded at once. "Don't worry, master. I won't leave the Tongtian pavilion unless something happens." After all, the Tongtian pavilion was considered a major force in this world. In addition, the owner of the Tongtian pavilion, Qi Shao, had always been domineering, so no one dared to provoke him. However, both of them were thinking too simply. Sometimes, when those people were really interested in something, they wouldn't care about these questions. At night, Gu Xingyin watched as several black-robed men broke into Gu Yensui's bedroom. When did the guards of the Tongtian pavilion become so bad? She took a closer look, and her heart shrank, for incarnation stage Yao cultivators. Also, if a powerhouse of the transformation stage wanted to come in, no matter how powerful the Tongtian pavilion's defense was, could it stop them? While she was in a daze, Gu Yensui was already in the hands of one of the black-robed men. Seeing that the man didn't seem to have any malice towards him, Gu Xingyin was a little relieved. In her current state, she was no longer able to have a conflict with a powerhouse of the transformation stage. She could only condense a wisp of divine sense and send a message to the Tongtian pavilion master. "N? Which scoundrel dares to come to my Tongtian pavilion to be presumptuous?" With an angry shout, several black-robed men looked at each other, and without hesitation, they hugged Gu Yensui and left. When Qi Shao and the others rushed over, it was already too late. There were obvious traces of someone in Gu Yensui's room, but he himself was nowhere to be seen. The whereabouts of the four black-robed men were not smooth either. The speed of the transformation stage Yao cultivators was extremely fast. After leaving Tongtian City, they encountered obstacles. Chapter 1034. Gu Xingyin looked at the group of people who obviously didn't come with good intentions. Their target seemed to be Gu Yensui as well. She suddenly became curious. She didn't know the identity of this little disciple she adopted on a whim. He could actually cause so many strong masters to make a big fuss. The other three people all took a step forward and protected the demon cultivator who was holding Gu Yensui behind them. "Bai Qing, what do you want to do?" one of them asked with an unclear expression. The white-haired man covered his mouth and laughed. His expression was even more delicate than a woman's. "Don't be so impolite. Of course, we came here today just to confirm. This," he pointed at the unconscious Gu Yensui. "Is he really the descendant of the Crimson Emperor?" "Crimson Emperor?" Gu Xingyin's heart quivered. Some memories surfaced in her mind. In the demon race, those who could be called emperor must be the emperor who was recognized by all the demon races. And different races received different titles. The Crimson Emperor could only be that kind of demon beast, the Crimson Fire Qilin. Gu Yensui might have the bloodline of the Crimson Fire Qilin. She had been searching for so long and always thought it was the most difficult to obtain material to reconstruct the physical body, but it had always been by her side. Gu Xingyin felt that this was really a big joke. She was still thinking when she heard someone beside her say, "I don't understand what you're talking about." Bai Qing continued to cover his mouth and laugh. "If you don't understand what I'm talking about, just give him to us and then leave, okay?" The black-robed man holding Gu Yensui said coldly, "Impossible. Bai Qing, you actually cooperated with demon cultivators. Have you forgotten the rules left by the Crimson Emperor back then?" Bai Qing smiled carelessly. "Look at what you're saying. How many years has it been since the Crimson Emperor died? Only fools like you still want to find his bloodline. If you ask me, the demon race should have a new emperor long ago. But it can't be you. You." Both sides did not budge an inch and actually started to fight. Gu Xingyin estimated the situation. The person who took Gu Yensui away shouldn't have any bad intentions, but the other side was different. From the looks of it, they were probably here to silence him. Although there were 4 transformation stage powerhouses here, the people on the other side were not weak either. In addition to the same 4 spirit severing stage beast cultivators, there were also 2 devil cultivators. No wonder they were so arrogant. Of the 4 black-robed men, one of them had to protect Gu Yensui. The other 3 had no chance of winning against the 6 opponents. Gu Xingyin was secretly anxious. Before she left, she had left a message for the people at the Tongtian Pavilion, but they had not arrived yet. It was obvious that they did not understand her meaning. I say, Hu Pao, you are also a famous powerhouse in our demon race. Why do you have to go against us for such a little kid? The 3 people had already fallen, and only the demon protecting Gu Yensui was still bitterly holding on. At this moment, Gu Yensui's eyelashes trembled, and he actually woke up at this moment. He looked at the situation in front of him and his heart tightened. He subconsciously shouted, "Master?" Gu Xingyin told him the current situation in a few words. She felt a little uneasy. In such a situation, Gu Yensui's side simply had no chance of winning. When the man saw that Gu Yensui had woken up, he put him down. He seemed to be a little guilty. "I'm really sorry, young master. I thought I could bring you back to the demon race, but I didn't expect that something like this would happen. Don't worry, I will definitely risk my life to bring you out. End of the night, see you in the morning." Probably, after a wave of poison is released tomorrow, this world will end. The world of cultivation follows a lot of plots. Do you feel bored? Chapter 1035. Bai Qing looked at this person with some disdain and sneered, "You want to send her out?" He lightly pressed his palm toward the black-robed man. The black-robed man seemed to be seriously injured. With a cry, he spat out a mouthful of blood, and his whole body collapsed powerlessly. Gu Yensui looked around and saw that those people had surrounded him. He calmly looked at Bai Qing, who seemed to be the leader, and asked, "Can you tell me what is going on?" Bai Qing looked at Gu Yensui's face with some jealousy. Although he was a male demon, he had an extremely gorgeous face and cared more about his appearance than most female demons. At this moment, he saw Gu Yensui's exquisite face. It was not as gorgeous as the one he had meticulously dressed up for, but it had its own kind of natural exquisite beauty. This kind of innate advantage was something that he could not overcome. However, so what if he was so beautiful? Today, he was going to die here. He sneered and said, "You'd better wait until you go down and ask your dead father." He was ready to kill Gu Yensui. However, he heard the demon cultivator's voice. "Bai Qing, does this kid really have the bloodline of the Red Fire Qilin? If so, how about you give him to me as a favor?" His gloomy eyes fell on Gu Yensui greedily. The Red Fire Qilin was the supreme of the Jade clan. His blood, bones, and even flesh were all good things. Unknowingly, a delicate and pretty girl had appeared beside him. The girl's cultivation was only at the 9th level of Qi refinement. Her appearance was not very outstanding, but there was a red mole between her eyebrows, which gave her some charm. The girl nestled in the demon cultivator's arms and said softly, "Why don't you give this kid to me?" The girl was Jojo. After she became this demon cultivator's cultivation furnace, her cultivation had improved a lot through dual cultivation. However, no matter how much dual cultivation, it could not compare to the top talent of the Red Fire Qilin, right? The way she looked at Gu Yensui was not much more restrained than the fiendish cultivator beside her. Hearing this, Gu Yensui glanced at Jojo. Because she had the same cinnabar mole as his master, her attention was drawn to him for a moment. Unfortunately, he averted his gaze. They were both women, but his master was like a celestial maiden from the 9th heaven, bright and clear as the moon. As for this person, she simply made him not want to look at her a second time. The 2 devil cultivators flirted with each other as if there was no one else around. With just a few words, they wanted to tear Gu Yensui into pieces. They didn't care about the others at all. Bai Qing was originally a little unhappy about being interrupted by the fiendish cultivator, but when he heard this, he actually became interested. He stroked his chin and said, "Since the two of you have such thoughts, how about I give this person to you?" He looked at Gu Yensui maliciously. "So what if you have the bloodline of the Red Fire Qilin? Today, you still fell into my hands. I am the knife, and you are the fish to be slaughtered by my subordinates." Gu Yensui had been standing quietly. In fact, under the pressure of 6 powerhouses at the incarnation stage, he had already consumed all his spiritual power to keep standing. Gu Shengyin was chatting with the system. With the current soul strength of this body, what will the consequences be if it can force back 6 powerhouses at the incarnation stage? The system answered without hesitation, "The host's soul has been damaged the last time by forcibly using the power of the soul. This time, if you forcibly use the power again, you will fall into a long sleep at best, and you will be annihilated at worst." Chapter 1036. If he turned into ashes, this mission would be considered a failure. For Gu Shengyin, her existence was to complete the mission. The failure of the mission itself would be a big blow to her. However, if she didn't do anything, she glanced at Gu Yensui, whose face was pale and forehead was faintly covered with cold sweat. If she didn't do anything, the child she had raised for so many years would die. Originally, she accepted him as a disciple in order to rebuild her physical body. But she didn't expect that in the end, she would have to pay such a big price for him. Gu Shengyin gave a wry smile and slowly appeared in the void. The coercion belonging to a strong person in the nature's test realm swept the whole site in an instant. Everyone felt the momentum as heavy as a mountain at the same time. The strong people in the incarnation realm were a little better, but their bodies sank and they were a little breathless. Jojo, a cultivator in the Lianxi realm, directly spat out a mouthful of blood and lost consciousness. "Who gave you the guts to point fingers at my disciple?" Everyone looked at Gu Shengyin in midair in shock and horror. Her figure was suspended in midair, and her clothes were fluttering. She didn't look like a mortal. Was there such a master hiding beside the bloodline of the Red Fire Qilin? The moment Gu Shengyin appeared, Gu Yensui felt his body lightened, and the coercion that had been suppressing him disappeared. He hurriedly raised his head to look at his master, who was hovering in midair. However, he was more worried than happy. Last time, his master had fallen into a deep sleep for such a long time to deal with a single deity transformation cultivator. This time, there were 6 deity transformation cultivators. Bai Qing looked at Gu Shengyin's somewhat transparent figure, felt relieved, and suddenly laughed. "It's just a soul. Everyone, don't be fooled." Soul? Gu Shengyin slowly glanced at the 6 people below, and an extremely contemptuous smile appeared on her white jade-like face. Bai Qing looked at him. The other party's disdainful look made him feel that he should be angry. But looking at the other party's face, he couldn't get angry at all. How could there be such a beauty in this world? He had never heard of it before. He had never wanted to see anyone who was prettier than him, but the moment he saw Gu Shengyin, all his jealousy disappeared. In his heart, he was thinking that such a beauty should be worshipped by others since she was born. In his mind, he was already thinking of what method he would use to make this beauty submit, and then, he heard the other party's cold voice. "Even if I'm only left with my soul, it's still enough to deal with you ants." Gu Shengyin raised her hand. Her 5 fingers formed a claw, and purple lightning appeared out of nowhere from her hand. At the same time, the originally clear and cloudless blue sky was suddenly filled with dark clouds and fierce winds. Several bolts of lightning and thunder struck down, as if they wanted to split the world apart. To be able to affect the spiritual chi of heaven and earth to this extent, only the legendary strong people in the tribulation realm, who were only one step away from the immortal realm. Strong people in the tribulation realm hadn't appeared in the whole cultivation world for tens of thousands of years. Only in the few surviving historical records of the antiquity times, one could get a glimpse of their power. What this woman said was absolutely right. Judging from the power of her movements, they couldn't deal with a strong person in the tribulation realm, even if it was just a soul. Chapter 1037. They subconsciously wanted to escape. But how could they easily escape from the domain of a strong person in the crossing calamity stage? These 6 strong people in the incarnation stage who could call the wind and summon the rain in the world of cultivation, at this moment, they finally understood what Gu Yensui felt before. Their whole body seemed to be imprisoned by something invisible, and they could not move at all. Gu Yensui looked at his master who was in midair. The strong wind rolled up her long hair and danced in the air. She stood between heaven and earth, with purple thunder flashing in her hands. Above her head was the roaring thunder and lightning, and under her feet was the roaring wind. She was like the legendary immortal goddess who controlled thunder and lightning. But such power made him feel more and more uneasy. There was an intuition in his heart that kept calling him, telling him, let her stop. But before he had time to speak, he saw his master raise her hands. Thousands of purple thunder roared from the 9th heaven and flew toward the 6 people. There was a wailing sound, but Gu Yensui did not pay attention to it. His eyes stared unblinkingly at the white-clothed figure in the middle of the purple light barrier. As if aware of his gaze, Gu Xingyin suddenly turned around and looked at him. Seeing her little disciple, Gu Xingyin's cold eyes softened in an instant. She showed a smile, as if thousands of flowers suddenly bloomed in this thunder and lightning. However, Gu Yensui's heart was even more uneasy. He heard the voice calling him, Yen Sui. Yen Sui, in the future, when I am not here, you have to take good care of yourself. I will always look after you. Believe in me, I will not really die. Gu Xingyin thought for a moment and said this sentence. She did not know whether she could survive this time. She had to give her disciple a preventive injection first. Otherwise, this child was so dependent on her, what if he could not figure it out? She felt that in her soul, waves of weakness came out. She knew in her heart that it was time. Finally, she left Gu Yensui a smile, and her consciousness had already dimmed. Gu Yensui watched helplessly as his master's figure slowly dimmed. It was like a piece of bright jade that had completely lost its color. In the end, it shattered into pieces. He looked at the empty sky, and a red color suddenly appeared in his eyes, covering the sky and earth. There was nothing. He could not see the thunder and lightning, could not see the bodies on the ground, could not see anything. He only knew how to stare at the empty void. If there were others here, they would be very surprised to find that this man's eyes had completely turned into golden vertical pupils, and the momentum around his body was also rising at an extremely terrifying speed. From the Great Completion Foundation establishment to the early gold core, the middle gold core, the late gold core, the early nascent soul, the middle nascent soul, the late nascent soul, the Great Completion nascent soul. Then, in one to the immortal stage. However, there was no conscious living person around, and Gu Yensui did not pay attention to the changes in his body at all. He only thought in a daze, Master is gone. The master who saved him from the beggar's nest, taught him how to be a human, taught him cultivation, and brought his life into a completely different world. Gone. He worked so hard to cultivate, just so that one day, when he was strong enough, he could protect his master. But now, his master was gone. He sat on the ground in a daze, like a helpless child. After a long time, a drop of scarlet tears fell onto the charred ground. Chapter 1038. When Gu Xingyin woke up, she found that her consciousness could control her body. Her first reaction was, she had failed the mission and returned to the space. However, the system's next sentence told her that the mission was not over yet. Host, you've finally woken up. You've been asleep for a total of 487 years. 487 years? Gu Xingyin blinked her eyes and looked down at her hands. They were pale and soft. Because she had not been exposed to the sun for many years, she could see the light blue blood vessels under her white skin. The spiritual energy in her body was not enough. In terms of strength, she should be at the golden core stage. She took another look at her surroundings. This was a very luxurious bedroom. The furnishings in the room were all exquisite and extraordinary. Many of the seemingly unremarkable furnishings were emitting a faint spiritual energy. She subconsciously asked the system, where am I? Could it be that she had transmigrated again and her soul was attached to someone else's body? The system replied, this is the low-level demon clan's territory, Thousand Empty Mountain. Demon Clan's territory? Gu Xingyin only felt a slight headache. System, don't keep me in suspense. Quickly, tell me all the news from these years. The system obediently did as told. It turned out that on that day, after she displayed her invincible might and killed the 6 demigod cultivators and Jojo, her soul almost turned into ashes. Gu Yensui watched her master disappear in front of her eyes. Under the great shock, she actually awakened the Red Fire Qilin bloodline that had been sealed since birth. The Red Fire Qilin was a lucky beast. It was also his awakening that protected Gu Xingyin's true spirit. After more than 400 years, after Gu Yensui unified the demon clan, she wholeheartedly searched for the world's most precious treasures to nourish her true spirit. She also constantly searched for materials to reconstruct her physical body. Finally, 50 years ago, she fused her own blood and refined a new physical body for her. She also put her true spirit into the physical body. But for some reason, she had been unable to wake up for the past 50 years. After Gu Xingyin sorted out the things that happened in these years, she sighed, I didn't accept this disciple for nothing. She's so filial. The system. Seeing its host like this, it was too embarrassed to tell her what her filial disciple did to her respected master. Just as Gu Xingyin was still lamenting, a person who looked like a maidservant walked in with a jade plate. She then saw Gu, who was sitting on the bed. Their eyes met. The maidservant's hand loosened and the jade plate made a crisp sound. Then, Gu Xingyin watched the maidservant cover her mouth and ran out. Gu Xingyin, just how scary was she? She suddenly remembered something. System, I didn't fail my mission, did I? The system answered honestly, as long as the host is not dead, the mission is not over. Gu Xingyin was overjoyed. Jojo had died more than 400 years ago. Didn't that mean that as long as she passed down the lost techniques of the ancient times and benefited the entire cultivation world, the mission would be completed? Now that she had a physical body, it was only a matter of time before she regained her strength. Wouldn't completing the mission be a piece of cake? Gu Xingyin, who was immersed in her own thoughts, did not notice that a golden figure had silently entered the bedroom. Of course, it was also because her strength had declined. Or perhaps, the other party was too powerful. Chapter 1039. Gu Yensui greedily stared at the face that had appeared in his dreams countless times. This was his master. He had spent more than 400 years waiting for her to wake up. His mind had been paying attention to this side. When he heard the sound of the jade plate falling to the ground, he put down the things in his hands and rushed over. Then, he met the servant girl who looked excited. The news he heard from the servant girl made him think that he was dreaming. He had been waiting for this news day and night, but when he heard that she had woken up, he hesitated. What if it was just a false hope? His heart was hesitating, but his feet did not stop moving. He arrived at the sleeping chamber. He did not seem to see her. Gu Yensui approached softly and called out, Master. Gu Xingyin raised her head. Along with the figure that suddenly appeared in front of his eyes was a lotus fragrance that assailed his nostrils. What's going on? Gu Xingyin asked the system in confusion. She had been with Gu Yensui for so many years, but she had never smelled this scent on him. The system said, only a soul without a physical body can't smell it, or the other party has not awakened their bloodline, so you can't smell it. Between these two options, which one do you choose? Gu Xingyin. Alright, she already knew what the system meant. She looked at the person in front of her carefully again. Her little disciple had grown up. The originally androgynous youth with delicate features had now grown into a handsome young man. His appearance was still aggressive and beautiful, but no one would ever mistake his gender for another. So tall. Gu Xingyin raised her head and thought. Then, she called out, Yensui. Gu Yensui, who had been expressionless, finally smiled after hearing this familiar call. In the next moment, Gu Xingyin felt that she was embraced by a fiery embrace. The other party hugged her with a strength that would not hurt her, but would not let her escape. She wanted to break free, but she found that the arms around her were trembling. Her heart softened immediately. She relaxed her body and allowed Gu Yensui to hug her. Gu Yensui was delighted when he felt the other party's attitude soften. He hugged the person in his arms even harder and said in a muffled voice, "Master, I've waited for you for 487 years and 44 days. He was only 16 when he lost her. But it took him more than 400 years to get her back into his arms." Gu Shengyin could not help but twitch her ears when she felt his hot breath. She moved her body. "Yen Sui, get up and talk properly." Fortunately, she was still his master, so her prestige was still there. Gu Yensui was a little reluctant, but he still obediently let go of her hand. He reached out and moved a stool over to sit beside Gu Shengyin. Gu Yensui stared at her master without blinking. When this person was unconscious, he had looked at her like this countless times. But there was never a time when he was so happy. Gu Shengyin was also happy to see Gu Yensui. The two of them chatted together for a while. Most of the time, Gu Yensui was talking, and Gu Shengyin listened quietly. Gu Yensui picked some interesting and relaxing things to tell Gu Shengyin. However, Gu Shengyin wasn't someone who didn't know anything. Gu Yensui had been a person without any foundation. Now, he had made the entire demon race submit to him. What he had experienced was definitely not as easy as he made it sound. Chapter 1040. It was just that Gu Yensui himself was unwilling to say, and Gu Shengyin certainly wouldn't ask. Gu Yensui talked alone for a long time. It wasn't until he roughly finished talking about his experiences over the years that he looked at Gu Shengyin. "I never knew about Master's background, and even..." His long eyelashes drooped down, like a butterfly flapping its wings. "I don't even know Master's name." When he said this, his tone was a little depressed, as if his whole person was very wronged. God knows, if the demon clan outside saw their indifferent and domineering demon emperor like this, what would they think? Gu Shengyin didn't find it strange. In her heart, her impression of Gu Yensui was still the delicate and cute young man of the past. Although this young man was now a head taller than her, he was still her little disciple. Looking at Gu Yensui's disappointed look, Gu Shengyin couldn't help but raise her head and gently touch his head. Gu Yensui instantly raised his head and looked at his master in surprise. Gu Shengyin smiled gently at him. "My name is Shi Lingxi, at that time I was called the Jinghong Fairy." She briefly explained what had happened to her. "A strong cultivator in the tribulation stage, no wonder Master is so powerful," Gu Yensui said with a smile. But the next second, he frowned. "But that's not right, Master, you said at that time that I was named after your surname." Meeting her disciple's burning gaze, Gu Shengyin secretly scolded herself for being so impulsive at that time, to say her surname just like that. She smiled and said, "A lie, Shi Lingxi is the name my master gave me. Before I became her disciple, my common surname was Gu." Gu Yensui didn't care much about this. He had personally experienced how much his master had treated him, and there was really no need to care about these unimportant things. "I want to go down for a walk," Gu Shengyin said. Anyone who knew that they had been lying down for 50 years would want to get up and walk around. She got up. After all, this body had the cultivation of the gold core stage, and there was no sign of weakness in her limbs. But even so, Gu Yensui still supported Gu Shengyin's arm the moment she got down. "Master, be careful." Looking at her disciple who treated her like a fragile object, Gu found that it was useless to glare at him, and could only helplessly let him handle it. After coming out, Gu Shengyin realized that he was actually living on the peak of a mountain. There were many maids passing around, but no one's as to look at them. It could be seen how strict Gu's was. "It's here, so beautiful SSS." At this time, the sun was about to set. Before the sun set, the entire horizon was reflected with a layer of pinkish-purple light, magnificent and gorgeous. Gu Yensui turned his head, one hand holding her shoulder, and smiled gently. "I once heard Master say that you like to watch the sunrise and sunset the most, so I specially found this place." "Master, this is a place I specially found for you." Gu Shengyin also turned her head to look at this disciple who had grown into a mature man. The afterglow of the setting sun shone on his chiseled and handsome face, showing off the advantages of his facial features. In his eyes, there was undisguised tenderness. An arm wrapped around her waist, and the distance between them was shortened. A warm breath brushed past her ear. Master, I have delusional thoughts about you. Chapter 1041. The physical body that Gu Xingyin reconstructed was simply heaven-defying. In addition, she had already confirmed her relationship with Gu Yensui. In the remaining days, she wholeheartedly focused on increasing her strength. When she was in the soul formation stage, she established a sect on a mountain peak that was rich in spiritual energy not far from the empty mountain, Purple Clouds Dao Sect. In the beginning, no one knew about this unknown sect. But her sect's name was grand. What was even rarer was that Gu Yensui commanded the entire demon race to publicize the Purple Clouds Dao Sect to the entire cultivation world. In an instant, the Purple Clouds Dao Sect became famous. With fame, there was naturally trouble. But those who came to find trouble openly and secretly were all slapped down the mountain by Gu Yensui. Thus, there were rumors that the Purple Clouds Dao Sect was built by the Demon King for his wife. Gu Yensui himself called it, for fun. No one had heard of the sect master called Jinghong Fairy. Even within the demon race, there were many people who had opinions about this. Those demon race had long heard that the Demon King had a lover who was like a treasure. None of them had seen Gu Xingyin's strength, but many had seen Gu Xingyin's face. In this way, Gu Xingyin's reputation as a femme fatale spread more and more. The person in question did not have any reaction to this. She even stopped Gu Yensui. Their mouths are on those people's bodies. You can control their mouths, but can you control their hearts? Gu Xingyin smiled and comforted the indignant disciples. Her face was calm. In this cultivation world, there is always only one way to make people shut up. While everyone was looking at this so-called Purple Clouds Dao sect as if they were watching a joke, Gu Xingyin welcomed the lightning tribulation for her advancement. The entire cultivation world was shaken by the powerful lightning tribulation. After asking around, what? Was this the legendary Purple Clouds sect master who only had a fairy-like appearance? 1 strike, 2 strikes, 18 strikes, 49 strikes, 56 strikes. The more they counted, the more shocked they became. In order to advance to the divine transformation realm, one had to face 49 lightning tribulations. Advancing to the body integration stage required a total of 64 lightning tribulations. In order to advance from the form synthesis stage to the legendary crossing tribulation stage, one had to go through 81 lightning strikes. Looking at the number of tribulation lightning bolts, there were already more than 49 of them. Could it be that this man was progressing to the body integration stage? In the past 5,000 years, only one cultivator had successfully broken through the soul formation stage and reached the body integration stage. That person was the current ruler of the demon clan, Gu Yensui, who possessed the bloodline of the red fire Qilin. His strength was also the main reason why he was able to control the demon clan in such a short time. And now, was there going to be a second one? Those who had previously looked down on the Purple Clouds Dao sect master felt an indescribable pain in their faces. The other party had already come this far. Regardless of whether they succeeded this time or not, they were already ahead of them. And those youths who were hesitant because of the recent rumors also stepped on the road to the Purple Clouds Dao sect. Gu Yensui was the only one who had no doubts about his master's ability to survive the lightning tribulation. She was originally a crossing tribulation stage powerhouse. Even if her spiritual power was only at the body integration stage, her strength was not comparable to ordinary body integration stage powerhouses. In the rolling black tribulation clouds that no one saw, Gu Xingyin's hair fluttered in the wind. She faced the aggressive tribulation lightning calmly without any sadness or joy. Chapter 1042. Not only was the sect leader of the Purple Clouds Dao sect the Daoist companion of the Daoist emperor, she was also a combined body fusion stage cultivator. In the cultivation world, it was not without reason that power decided everything. With their own power and the Daoist emperor Gu Yensui's unconditional support, the Purple Clouds Dao sect was developing at a terrifying speed. The cultivation world situation of being monopolized for thousands of years was broken. Those large sects wanted to stop it, because the rise of the Purple Clouds Dao sect had harmed their interests. But they did not have the power to stop it. Another 500 years later. The Purple Clouds Tao sect, which had become one of the top sects in the cultivation world, once again welcomed the lightning tribulation. 81 lightning tribulations. The only tribulation stage cultivator in the cultivation world in 10,000 years. Because of this, the Jinghong Fairy's name became famous, and the Purple Clouds Tao sect became the only cultivation holy land in the cultivation world's eyes. Ding! Congratulations to the host for completing the mission. The system notification rang out. Gu Xingyin smiled. She took in a few nominal disciples and taught them the cultivation techniques that had long been buried in the river of time 10,000 years ago. The Purple Clouds Tao sect's foundation made countless sects speechless, and at the same time, jealous. After successfully grooming the next generation of successors, Gu Xingyin retreated behind the scenes and became the Purple Clouds Tao sect's pillar. With such a tribulation stage cultivator, no one could shake the Purple Clouds Tao sect's position. And everyone knew that there were only two places to meet the Jinghong Fairy. The Purple Clouds Peak, which was covered in snow all year round, and the Taoist sacred ground, Empty Mountain. In fact, the frequency of her appearing in the latter was even higher. Everyone knew that the Jinghong Fairy and the Taoist Emperor were a pair of Taoist companions, and the two of them were inseparable. It was even said that when the Taoist Emperor was 3,000 years old, the Jinghong Fairy used her own blood essence to create a heart-connecting talisman for him. With this talisman, even if the two of them were in different places, they would still be able to communicate telepathically. She could even forcefully transfer the damage to herself when her Tao partner was fatally injured. In the past, everyone envied sect master Zi Shao for his good looks. He had caught the eye of the Demon Emperor, and from then on, he had a meteoric rise. But now, the target of envy was the Demon Emperor. What did he do to make the Jinghong Fairy, who was the best in the cultivation world in both appearance and strength, so loyal to him? However, some things would always happen between the two of them. The others were just making wild guesses while chatting. Gu Xingyin spent 10,000 years in this world with her little disciple. Until the blue sea turned into mulberry fields, and a new cycle of reincarnation descended. The two of them held hands, closed their eyes together, and stepped into a new cycle. This was an exceptionally luxurious room. The huge crystal chandelier overhead took up almost half of the entire ceiling, and the furnishings in the room were all the latest limited edition models from major international luxury brands. The entire room was pink in color. Whether it was the princess doll that was as tall as a person in the corner or the wardrobe that was full of girly dresses, it was clear that the owner of this room was a little princess who was doted on by everyone. Now, this little princess was lying on a big bed that was big enough for her to do a few somersaults on. She had mesmerizing big black eyes, long eyelashes that were like neat and fine brushes, a delicate little nose, and a pair of lips that were as beautiful as cherry blossoms. When she smiled, two cute little canine teeth would be revealed, and she looked quite harmless. However, that was just how it looked. Chapter 1043. Gu Xingyin knew that when this cherry blossom-like mouth opened, those two cute and harmless canine teeth would pierce deeply into one's flesh and suck out one's blood. The dark red tongue licked the corner of your blood-stained lips. It was a charm and danger that humans couldn't resist. This girl with an angelic face was called Weisheng Yingluo. During the day, she was a student of St. Rhodia High School. At night, she was a pure-blooded princess of the Weisheng family, a vampire who walked in the darkness and fed on human blood. Now, Gu Xingyin had arrived in Weisheng Yingluo's body. Gu Xingyin was a little surprised to know that she had once again received a mission about vampires. However, when she finished reading the plots seriously, she understood that this was completely different from the vampire world she had experienced before. The living habits of the vampires in that era were closer to the aristocrats of the Middle Ages. They were arrogant, powerful, and did whatever they wanted. They disdained humans and existed arrogantly. They even clearly separated their lives from the lives of ordinary humans. But this world was different. Ordinary humans didn't know about the existence of vampires at all. Vampires quietly integrated into the human world and coexisted with them. Even the changes of time made their physique and blood evolve, and they were no longer afraid of the sun. As the noblest pure-blooded vampire, Wei Xingyin Luo even had to go to school like ordinary humans. Humans and vampires coexisted peacefully with each other. Today was Sunday, so there was no school. Gu Xingyin lazily stayed in the Weixing family's castle. She slowly organized the plot of this world. The female lead of this world, Wei Xingyin Luo, was the princess of the Weixing family, a pure-blooded vampire aristocrat. In this generation, the Weixing family had two pure-blooded heirs. The eldest son, Wei Xingliang, and the second daughter, Wei Xingyin Luo. Although they were the eldest son and the second daughter, they were only born a few minutes apart. That's right, Wei Xingliang and Wei Xingyin Luo were twins. However, a vampire's appearance was determined by their power. Wei Xingliang, the elder brother, had absorbed too much of his mother's power when he was in her womb. As a result, Wei Xingliang had the appearance of an adult man and had been in charge of the Weixing family's business empire overseas. As for Wei Xingyin Luo, she had maintained the appearance of a 16 or 17-year-old girl. According to the tradition of the vampire family, if there were two pure-blooded members in the family, one male and one female, then in order to maintain the purity of the family bloodline, it would be best for these two to become partners and continue to be the heir of the family with the purest bloodline. This was a very common occurrence among purebloods. For example, Wei Xingyin Luo's biological parents were a pair of siblings. Gu Xingyin was speechless. It was only because vampires didn't have to worry about genetic mutations that they dared to do this. Vampires had long lifespans and unlimited wealth. According to the original plan, Wei Xingyin Luo would have been engaged to Wei Xingliang, who had returned to the country, after 3 years of schooling. Afterwards, they would have gotten married as soon as possible and given birth to an heir. After the heir grew up, she would be able to put down her burdens and enjoy life to the fullest, just like her parents. Her life, from the beginning to the end, would not have any problems. In short, she was a winner in life. Chapter 1044. But the winner in life met another girl with a sense of justice. Vampire hunter Xiao Zhanggui. Strictly speaking, Xiao Zhanggui wasn't even a qualified vampire hunter. She was a girl who was very curious about all kinds of supernatural things since she was young. At the age of 15, by chance, she obtained a special ability, to see through all non-human disguises. It was this special ability that led her to be found by the Vampire Hunter Association and let her join them. Xiao Zhanggui, on the other hand, had been brainwashed by the Vampire Hunter Association to believe that vampires were the dirtiest and most evil creatures in the world. Her biggest goal in life was to eliminate all vampires in the world. However, she didn't have any talent. The Vampire Hunter Association valued her ability to sense vampires at the first instance, and wanted her to serve the entire association. And when she transferred to St. Radia High School, she recognized the pure-blood vampire Wei Xingyin Luo at first glance. Xiao Zhanggui kept going against Wei Xingyin Luo, and Wei Xingyin Luo didn't know why, but she felt that this human was really interesting, and always used a teasing attitude to tease her. But this vampire hunter with no ability actually accidentally broke into her territory when she was at her weakest. Xiao Zhanggui didn't have any good feelings towards vampires. Seeing Wei Xingyin Luo unconscious on the ground, he didn't hesitate to stab a special silver tool into her heart. She didn't die, but her body was taken to the Vampire Hunter Association and was permanently sealed. When Wei Xingyin Luo came back from abroad, what she took back from the Vampire Hunter Association was her sister's cold body without any warmth. After Gu Xingyin finished reading, she felt a bit strange. It was too unreasonable. She asked, "System, I think it's very strange." "System, if the host has any questions, you can ask." Gu Xingyin said, "Wei Xingyin Luo is still a pure-blood princess. When she's at her weakest, shouldn't she be staying in her castle? And with her noble status, shouldn't there be vampires guarding her? That Xiao Zhanggui is such a weak vampire hunter. How did he come to the place where she was unconscious and almost killed her?" The system was silent for a moment. After a while, it finally answered Gu Xingyin's question. In some worlds, due to various reasons, in order to follow a certain plot, all unreasonable aspects will be weakened. Host, Please don't look at things with logic. Without logic? Then. Gu Xingyin's heart skipped a beat. Then can I not follow logic when completing the quest? The system said, as long as it doesn't violate the character settings, it won't be a big problem. Gu Xingyin nodded and seemed very satisfied. That's good. The system, he had a feeling that something bad was going to happen. Knock knock knock. There was a knock on the door, and the butler's voice sounded. Your Highness Ing Luo, His Highness Liang will return tonight. What? Would Weisheng Liang return? Gu Xingyin was shocked. If she remembered correctly, Weisheng Liang had been abroad all this time, and only rushed back when he found out about his sister. The two siblings rarely saw each other after growing up, and their relationship wasn't very close. Why did he suddenly come back? Chapter 1045. Gu Xingyin asked with some surprise, brother came back so suddenly? The housekeeper outside the door answered very respectfully, His Highness Liang just informed me. He said that he will have dinner with you tonight. Gu Xingyin looked up at the time, it was 3:30 in the afternoon. I know. She replied. The siblings hadn't seen each other for 6 years, so it had to be a bit more formal. Gu Xingyin was no longer lying on the bed, but got up and opened the wardrobe. As vampires with eternal life, their wealth could no longer be measured by ordinary standards. At least Gu Xingyin knew that if any luxury clothing brand in the world released women's clothing, as long as Weisheng Ing Luo took a fancy to it, it would inevitably appear in her wardrobe the next day. She swiped her fingers and finally chose a small pink dress that wasn't grand or gorgeous. The close-fitting design perfectly displayed her graceful figure, and the soft pink clothes made her skin look even fairer and more translucent. Her hair was loosely tied up, revealing 2 knotty strands of hair hanging by her cheeks. A sweet and cute little girl instantly appeared in the mirror. Sitting in the living room early, Gu Xingyin showed great interest in Weisheng Ing Luo, who claimed to be the most powerful heir of a pure-blood vampire family. She had felt the power in this body before. After all, she was a pure-blood, and although Weisheng Ing Luo's strength couldn't be considered top-notch, it was still very good. That's right, system, what about the skill draw of my world? The system didn't talk nonsense, and after the white light flashed, it gave Gu Xingyin a pleasant surprise. A cup of Princess Brooke's blood, plus the princess's innate charm skill? Gu Xingyin silently looked at the cup of bright red blood, not knowing what to say. In terms of preciousness, the power of this cup of blood was without a doubt. Vampires were noble in terms of bloodline, and most of their power came from the bloodline. This was also the reason why the Weisheng family could persist in the marriage of pure blood members. There was no doubt that the blood of the queen of the Brooke clan, one of the 13 clans, was an irresistible temptation to any vampire in this world. Most importantly, Gu Xingyin didn't drink blood. No matter how many times she had been a vampire, or how many missions she had completed, she had no interest in such smelly things. Unlike Gu Xingyin, the system could not understand why Gu Xingyin did not speak for so long. The system was still very straightforward, so it asked directly. Host, is there a problem? Gu Xingyin pointed at the cup of blood. I don't drink blood. The system seemed very surprised. Host, who said you had to drink it? Gu Xingyin. A white light flashed from the system, and Gu Xingyin could only watch as the cup of blood turned into a blood-red light and entered his body. Almost in the blink of an eye, she felt that her body was full of power. Something was boiling in her body, and her waist-length hair grew uncontrollably until it reached her knees. Gu Xingyin used almost all of her strength to suppress the growth of her body and continue to maintain the appearance of a young girl. If there was such a big change overnight, it would be difficult for her to explain the reason. Fortunately, she was sitting alone in the living room, and the housekeeper and maids did not dare to disturb her unless she summoned them. Therefore, the scene just now was not seen by anyone. Suddenly, she sensed something. Her eyes moved, and she looked in the direction of the door. He was here. Chapter 1046. That kind of attraction and intimacy that came from their bloodline made Gu Xingyin want to rush up, pull open the door, and take a good look at her own twin brother. She tried her best to resist this almost irresistible impulse, and then stood up. The door was opened from the outside, and under the respectful gazes of the housekeeper and servants, a figure wearing a silver-gray long windbreaker appeared at the door. He was very tall, with a slender figure, and under his messy hair were deep and sharp eyes. His nose was straight, and below that were perfectly shaped thin lips. Wei Xingliang also immediately turned his gaze to the place that tugged at his heart. The intimacy of blood, especially for a pure-blooded, was the most irresistible feeling. Then, he saw a small pink figure rushing towards him at an extremely fast speed. Wei Xingliang subconsciously wanted to avoid it. He didn't like strangers getting close to him. But he immediately remembered that this wasn't anyone else, but his sister Ying Luo. Just as he paused, that soft figure crashed into his arms. Wei Xingliang's body reacted faster than his mind, and hugged the figure in his arms. Gu Xingyin hugged him tightly and took a deep breath of the familiar lotus fragrance. Then, she raised her head and looked at Wei Xing with her large eyes. She smiled coldly and said, "Big brother, you've finally thought of coming back to see me. I missed you so much." Her glass-like eyes were filled with undisguised joy and attachment. Wei Xingliang was startled. He hadn't spent much time with this sister. He vaguely remembered that the two of them had a very good relationship when they were young. He had been warned by his parents since he was young that Ying Luo was his sister and fiancée, and that he had to take good care of her. But after he was 10 years old, he was sent abroad, and the two siblings hadn't seen each other for a long time. Even their communication was very rare. He thought that Ying Luo would feel unfamiliar with him, but he didn't expect that she would still stick to him like before. Thinking of this, a secret joy rose in Wei Xingliang's heart. This was his sister, the only one in the world who had the same blood as him, Wei Xing Luo. He lowered his head, and gently planted a kiss on Gu Xingyin's forehead. He couldn't help but reveal a smile. "Ying Luo, big brother missed you too." Gu Xingyin's ears twitched when he heard his deep voice. He thought to himself, even his voice is so seductive. She reached out and touched her ears. Blushing slightly, she asked embarrassedly, "Brother, why did you suddenly come back?" Wei Xingliang looked at her bashful expression and snickered inwardly. He got closer and closer to Gu Xingyin, lowered his voice and said in her ear, "There's nothing big going on in the company during this time, so I came back to stay for a while, and also came back to see my Ying Luo." He looked at his sister's ears with satisfaction. Because of his words, her ears were dyed with a thin layer of red. There was a layer of pink on her sparkling white skin. It was indescribably cute and seductive, making people want to take a bite. In fact, that was exactly what Wei Xingliang thought. Not only did he have such thoughts, he didn't even try to hide his desire as he leaned over and bit her. Feeling the tingling pain in her ears, Gu Xingyin looked at Wei Xingliang in disbelief. Was it really okay to act like a hooligan in front of his sister, whom he hadn't seen for several years? Oh, no, she wasn't just his sister, she was also his fiancée. Thinking of this, what he did didn't seem to be too excessive. Chapter 1047. Wei Xingliang reluctantly let go of the earlobe that had been rubbed by his teeth until it was bright red. Wei Xingliang reluctantly used the tip of his tongue to gently sweep the white earlobe. He felt the person in his arms slightly tremble because of his movements, and he laughed deeply. "Shy." He stretched out his finger and lifted Gu Xingyin's chin. Sure enough, the other's face was already completely red. He still felt it wasn't enough, and gently bit the corner of her lips. "Being so shy won't do, my Ying Luo." He laughed. "You are my fiancé, you have to get used to it." "Get used to it?" "Get used to what?" Gu Xingyin was a bit speechless. She knew that vampires had always been very indulgent with their desires, but she didn't expect the other party to be so open. Looking up and seeing the other's smiling face, Gu Xingyin resisted the urge to grind her teeth. She thought for a bit, and then smiled sweetly. She stood on her tiptoes and heavily bit Wei Xingliang's lips. She controlled the degree, and didn't break the skin and bleed, but the pain didn't lessen at all. Copying his actions, she licked the place she bit. Gu Xingyin raised her eyebrows and smiled at Wei Xingliang. Brother's taste is also much better than I imagined. Wei Xingliang's eyes instantly darkened. He laughed lowly. Is that so? Then Ing Luo, why don't you properly taste it again? His figure invaded Gu Xingyin's domain without any hesitation. His aura swept through Gu Xingyin's domain without restraint, until the latter was utterly defeated. This man was really petty. Gu Xingyin, who had recovered from her weak legs with great difficulty, glared at Wei Xingliang with some annoyance. Wasn't it just because he was stronger than her now? Just wait. She would pay him back one by one in the future. Wei Xingliang could only laugh out loud. His return to the country was originally a temporary plan, but he didn't expect to receive such a big surprise. Ing Luo was much more interesting than he had imagined. The next morning, Gu Xingyin woke up on time. She opened her eyes and immediately realized that she was sleeping in a man's arms. Her head rested on his arm, and her waist was tightly held by a large and powerful hand. Her entire body was almost lying in his embrace. The memory of last night came back to him. Just as she was about to go to bed, Wei Xingliang called her to his room. What? Sleep here? Her eyes widened. Wei Xingliang said seriously, you and I are engaged. Is there a problem? Gu Xingyin was speechless. What he said made sense. She was speechless. What made her even more speechless was that the vampire butler, who had watched her grow up, did not object at all. He even seemed to be very happy as he moved her daily necessities into the cool room. Anyway, the place was big, and it would not be crowded with one more person. As a result, Gu Xingyin successfully lived with her brother under everyone's delighted gazes. The memory stopped here. What are you thinking about? His deep voice still had the lazy hoarseness of the morning. It was extremely sexy. Gu Xingyin was awakened early in the morning. Hearing this, she replied, nothing, I should go to school. As if dissatisfied with her perfunctory answer, Gu Xingyin only felt her waist tighten. Then her body turned, and she was lying on Wei Xingliang's chest. Their eyes met. Nothing, N? Chapter 1048. Gu Xingyin struggled for a bit, then gave up and said, brother, put me down, I still have to go to school. Wei Xingliang ignored her words, only reaching out a hand to caress her lips. Tell me what you were thinking just now, and I'll let you go. Gu Xingyin. This man, why was his temper so overbearing? She told the truth, I miss my own bed. The hand on her waist tightened again, and the man's snort of laughter came. It seems that brother did something to making Luo dissatisfied. Gu Xingyin looked at the time again. If she didn't get up now, she would really be late. Although being late wasn't a big deal for her, she had something important to do today. Gu Xingyin hurriedly begged for mercy. No, brother, you're the best, everything is good, I'm just not used to it for a while. Seeing that she really seemed to be in a hurry, Wei Xingliang reluctantly let her go. Sleep more, you'll get used to it. Gu Xingyin nimbly got up, and hurriedly went into the bathroom to finish her business. Goodbye, brother. Wei Xingliang propped his head up on the bed, watching his sister quickly go out the door. Gu Xingyin finished her meal, and under the escort of her family's driver, she went to St. Radia High School. St. Radia High School, just from this impressive name, it was obvious that this wasn't a simple school. That's right, this was a legendary, aristocratic school among aristocratic schools, the top aristocratic high school. Sure enough, it was very rich. This was the feeling Gu Xingyin had as she walked from the school gate to the classroom. She went to her own class, and quietly sat in her seat, waiting for Xiao Zhanggui's arrival. That's right, today was the day that Onmyoji Xiao Zhanggui transferred to St. Radia High School. Although Xiao Zhanggui's family background wasn't bad, she didn't have the ability to go to St. Radia High School. This was the qualification that the Vampire Hunter Association had specially applied for her. After so many years of dealing with vampires, the Vampire Hunter Association had a good understanding of this race. They knew that their lifestyle was not something that could be described as simply extravagant. Naturally, they would not let go of a place like St. Radia. Who would have thought that they would actually catch a pure-blooded by chance? There was no morning self-study here. The bell for the first class rang on time. Gu Xingyin sat quietly in her seat, waiting for Xiao Zhanggui's arrival. Students, there's a new student in our class today. Let's welcome her. The gentle voice of the homeroom teacher sounded from the podium, but the response of the students below was rather perfunctory. Only a few people followed suit and clapped their hands. The homeroom teacher's expression was a little awkward, but she didn't dare to say anything. None of the students who could come to school here had simple family backgrounds. She couldn't afford to offend any of them. Xiao Zhanggui stood uneasily on the podium. Looking down at the well-dressed students, he said, "Hello, everyone. My name is Xiao Zhanggui. I'm very happy to be able to come to this class. Her self-introduction was suddenly interrupted. Her eyes widened as she excitedly pointed at Gu Xingyin. Vampire. The eyes of the entire class fell on her and Gu Xingyin. However, too many people just reflexively followed her gaze. After glancing at Gu Xingyin, they began to look at Xiao Zhanggui as if she was an idiot. Vampires? Did this newcomer read too many hot-blooded anime novels? Chapter 1049. Gu Xingyin looked around in surprise, then confirmed that the person Xiao Zhanggui was pointing at was her. She pointed at herself very strangely. "This student, are you talking about me?" Seeing her like this, Xiao Zhanggui knew in his heart that she was pretending, but his face was cold. "Evil vampire, don't pretend anymore. I don't know what your purpose is in lurking in this school, but I, Xiao Zhanggui, will never let you succeed." The class teacher who had been standing on the side and didn't understand the situation, the students who were dumbfounded the whole time, Gu Xingyin, who knew the truth. Although she knew the plot and understood that Xiao Zhanggui's EQ was a shortcoming, she really didn't find it challenging at all to be this stupid. Gu Xingyin held her forehead. The whole class seemed to feel a strong sense of powerlessness from her movements. Xiao Zhanggui still felt that the other party was frightened by his momentum and was about to continue. The class teacher next to him couldn't bear it anymore and said, "Enough. Student Xiao Zhanggui, there should be a limit to your jokes." Xiao Zhanggui was stunned. What joke? She looked at the class teacher and said, "I'm not joking, what I said is true, that girl is really a vampire. Vampires feed on human blood. She'll kill you." The class teacher endured, and stopped herself from looking at Xiao Zhanggui as if she was looking at a psychopath. Ying Luo has been studying here for more than a year and hasn't seen anything happen to our Saint Radia High School. But student Xiao Zhanggui, if you continue to disturb the order and spread rumors like this, I will personally report the situation to the Academic Affairs Office. Xiao Zhanggui looked at the class teacher in disbelief. She was clearly saving them, why didn't she believe it? She looked at the students below the stage and found that they were all looking at her with strange and mocking eyes. As if she was the monster that would eat people. And that vampire, she looked at Gu Xingyin. That vampire looked at her expressionlessly, but Xiao Zhanggui saw the mockery in her eyes. "See, so what if you're telling the truth? Not a single person will believe what you say." She took a deep breath and said resolutely to everyone, "Just wait and see. I will prove what I said." Because of what happened to Xiao Zhanggui just now, the homeroom teacher didn't have a good impression of this student. She randomly pointed at a spot far away from Gu Xingyin and left the classroom. Gu Xingyin thought that Xiao Zhanggui would not be able to resist coming to her during the break. She did not expect that Xiao Zhanggui was more patient than she thought. She didn't come over to look for her. She just kept staring at her with a creepy gaze. Gu Xingyin knew that she was afraid that he would run away. But in the eyes of others, Xiao Zhanggui's behavior was very suspicious. Ying Luo. Gu Xingyin's deskmate came over quietly and whispered, "Is that newcomer Xiao Zhanggui a pervert? I saw him staring at you. You have to be careful when you go home from school. I'm afraid that this kind of person's brain is not clear and will find trouble with you." "Thank you, Lily, I'll be fine." Gu Xingyin smiled and shook her head. Of course she would be fine. The one who would be in trouble would be Xiao Zhanggui. After school, Gu Xingyin went out of the classroom alone with his backpack. Xiao Zhanggui followed. Chapter 1050. When Gu Xingyin went out today, she specifically told the driver not to come out to pick her up today, just to give Xiao Zhanggui a chance to approach her alone. She walked slowly, as if she didn't notice that someone was following behind her. Until she reached a deserted alley. Xiao Zhanggui finally had a chance to appear after following her all the way. Wei Xingyin Luo, stop! She appeared from behind the wall and shouted at Gu Xingyin. Gu Xingyin stopped in her tracks. Student Xiao Zhanggui, why are you looking for me? Her expression was very innocent. Xiao Zhanggui said coldly, there's only the two of us here, don't pretend anymore. Damn vampire, I'm here to deal with you. Damn vampire? Gu Xingyin repeated softly. At the same time, an invisible barrier slowly enveloped the alley, and the pedestrians outside would temporarily forget about this place. Gu Xingyin put away the smile on her face, so what if I'm a vampire? Student Xiao Zhanggui. Xiao Zhanggui's eyes lit up, and with a shake of her hand, a silver chain appeared in her hands out of nowhere. Gu Xingyin's heart flashed with a trace of disgust. That was silverware. Gu Xingyin said, you've heard the teacher talk about it, haven't you? I've been at St. Rhodia High School for 2 years, and nothing has ever happened in the school. It's even because of my existence that those monsters don't dare to come to this school to look for food. I've never killed any humans. Pure bloods like them also had dignity, and didn't need to look for humans themselves. Xiao Zhanggui didn't listen to her at all. You're just quibbling by saying so much, you can't hide the nature of a dirty vampire at all. Gu Xingyin laughed softly, then, what do you want? Xiao Zhanggui took out the chain in her hand, of course it's to kill you. Gu Xingyin could clearly see that the chain was aimed at her heart without any hesitation. Xiao Zhanggui really wanted to kill her. Shwa! The chain instantly pierced through her chest. Gu Xingyin seemed to be stunned for a moment. Success! Xiao Zhanggui's eyes lit up. However, before she could rejoice for too long, a soft whisper entered her ears. Oh! What succeeded? Wei Xingyin Luo's voice. Xiao Zhanggui looked at the other end of the chain. Sure enough, the thing that was pierced by the chain was only an illusion. It was now slowly dissipating. Suddenly, he felt a chill in his chest. Xiao Zhanggui seemed to have sensed something and lowered his head with some difficulty. Her heart was pierced through by a snow-white hand. Vampire hunter who wants my life, it's better if you don't stay in this world. Gu Xingyin smiled as she pulled her hand out. There wasn't even a trace of blood on it. Xiao Zhanggui only felt that his heart was empty, as if something very important was missing. What was it? It was his heart. Gu Xingyin's hand just now had directly crushed her heart. Xiao Zhanggui's eyes suddenly widened, and then an intense pain came from his heart. Gu Xingyin didn't look at the person lying on the ground behind her and turned to leave. Soon, someone from the Vampire Hunter Association would come and take her body away. Walking out of the alley, Gu Xingyin turned her head, brother. Chapter 1051. Ing Luo. Ing Luo. Wei Xingliang called out to Gu Xingyin with some dissatisfaction. Was his charm that bad? He turned over and leaned over Gu Xingyin's body, hatefully biting Gu Xingyin. Gu Xingyin came back to her senses, looking at Wei Xingliang who seemed to be in a very bad mood with some bafflement. What's the matter? You're still not happy after eating meat? Her misty eyes made the dark fire in Wei Xingliang's heart quietly dissipate. He sighed, gently licking the place he had just bitten with the tip of his tongue. He really didn't know what to do with her. That's right, big brother. Gu Xingyin suddenly asked, if we want to destroy the Vampire Hunter Association, will it be difficult? Wei Xingliang's movements paused, asking, why did you suddenly think of this? He immediately thought of that stupid vampire hunter during the day. Was Ing Luo so angry? Since Ing Luo didn't like it, then there was no use keeping the Vampire Hunter Association. He said carelessly, Vampire Hunter Association? That's the group that wants to destroy us vampires all day in the name of justice? They're just a bunch of mobs. If we really want to make a move, our Weisheng family is enough. Gu Xingyin was secretly happy. But Weisheng Liang frowned. There are several high-level members in the Vampire Hunter Association who seem to have connections with other pure-blood families. Gu Xingyin knew about this. When she read the original plot, she knew that the Vampire Hunter Association wasn't as righteous as they said. On the contrary, the association was divided into two factions, the radical faction and the moderate faction. The radical faction advocated that vampires and vampires couldn't coexist, and must be killed on sight. Like Xiao Zhanggui from before, he was a member of the radical faction. But the moderate faction was different. They had always strived to find a point where humans and vampires could live in harmony, and this had always been their goal for so many years. Both sides had always been committed to internal strife for their own interests, and had no achievements in dealing with vampires. In fact, many of the vampire hunters in the Vampire Hunters Association had already been contacted by some vampire nobles in private. Every time there was a big movement in the Vampire Hunter Association, a few of the vampire nobles would receive the news long in advance. Perhaps Xiao Zhanggui died without knowing that the Vampire Hunter Association, which had always been synonymous with justice and fearlessness in her heart, was actually so filthy. Gu Xingyin carefully thought again, and felt that dealing with such an organization didn't seem too difficult. System, I accept the mission. The system had mentioned before that this kind of additional mission would allow him to receive more souls after completing it. It was still profitable. Weisheng Liang looked up and saw that Gu Xingyin had fallen silent again. She thought that Gu Xingyin was dissatisfied with her words. He reached out and stroked Gu Xingyin's long and smooth black hair, coaxing softly, Okay, if you really don't like the Vampire Hunter Association, I'll go visit those families tomorrow and let them know in advance. He had originally thought that it would be quite troublesome. The existence of the Vampire Hunters Association would at most have some effect on some low-level vampires. For pure-blooded nobles like them, those people were just playing monkeys, and would not pose any threat to them at all. But who told Ying Luo not to like it? He thought somewhat helplessly, girls are really very delicate. But unfortunately, he loved this delicate side of her. Chapter 1052. The next day, Gu Xingyin went to school. Of course, Xiao Zhanggui wouldn't come. And none of the students in the class were interested in her. After all, she was just a newcomer who had left a bad impression on everyone, so no one was in the mood to pay attention to her. Gu Xingyin wasn't worried about anything else. The Vampire Hunter Association would definitely take care of everything. Sure enough, when the homeroom teacher came in, there wasn't any unnatural expression on her face. Students, the newcomer yesterday, Xiao Zhanggui, can't continue to study in our class because of family reasons. Oh, a few people dragged out their words to show that they understood. The homeroom teacher didn't mind, and just announced the start of class. After school, Gu Xingyin saw a familiar car at the school gate. But there wasn't a driver waiting for her in the driver's seat, but a tall man leaning against the car. Wow! Ying Luo, is that your car? Who's that handsome guy? The girl walking beside Gu Xingyin looked at Weisheng Liang with shining eyes. This appearance, this figure, this temperament, he was simply the best among men. Gu Xingyin looked at her brother with some appreciation, and then smiled at the girl. My fiancé. The girl immediately retracted her gaze from Weisheng Liang. If that handsome guy didn't have an owner, she wouldn't mind striking up a conversation and getting his contact information, maybe even a romantic relationship would start. But, if he was someone else's fiancé, the girl shrugged. Forget it, don't provoke someone who already has an owner, that's the most basic principle. Then see you tomorrow, Ying Luo. The girl winked at Gu Xingyin. Then she lowered her voice and said mysteriously, You're so lucky, your fiancé is so handsome, he even personally picked you up from school. She left enviously. Gu Xingyin walked towards Weisheng Liang. As soon as she came to his side, Weisheng Liang very naturally took her backpack with one hand, and skillfully pulled her hand into his embrace with the other. A passionate kiss landed on her lips. Wow! Cool. There were many people coming and going at the school gate. Many students and passers-by saw this scene. The students loved to watch a good show and weren't afraid of things getting out of hand. A few of them even started to clap and whistle. Gu Xingyin was kissed until she was dizzy. She glanced at the people around her and saw that they were all looking at her with burning eyes. So many people are watching, she said in a low voice. She meant for him to be more careful. Wei Xingliang looked at her and smiled. I'm your fiancé, and you're my fiancé. What's wrong with us doing this? Just now, the conversation between Ying Luo and that girl, although their voices weren't loud, he heard every single word. Hearing her proclaim that he was her fiancé, Wei Xingliang felt that the cold blood in his body, which was unique to vampires, seemed to be boiling. Ying Luo, she could always control his emotions so easily. The two of them entered the car. Gu Xingyin realized that the car did not seem to be heading home. Where are we going? She was puzzled. Wei Xingliang turned his head and glanced at her. Don't you want to destroy the Vampire Hunter Association? I'll take you to meet a few people. Chapter 1053. For Wei Xingliang to meet him personally, it was naturally a vampire of equal status. With such status, and a vampire known for his extravagant lifestyle, Gu Xingyin could already foresee the scene of a tycoon. The result was as expected. The address was in the castle of another pure-blood vampire family, the Beitang family. When Wei Xingliang and Gu Xingyin arrived, the entire castle was already brightly lit. Faint noises could be heard from inside. A waiter respectfully came forward and led the two of them through the castle's gate. The scene before them appeared before their eyes. Almost at the same time, Wei Xingliang turned sideways, blocking Gu Xingyin's line of sight. Don't look. Then, a huge pressure belonging to a pureblood swept through the entire hall. The vampires who were partying on the dance floor all knelt down, trembling. They didn't understand why this master was suddenly angry. Get out of here, Wei Xingliang said coldly. None of the vampires dared to say a word, and they hurriedly left through the gate. In the blink of an eye, the only sound left in the hall was the music. The noisy and rhythmic music suddenly stopped, and at the same time, a lazy male voice sounded from the second floor. You're still so cold, Liang. There were quite a few beauties at the ball just now. Gu Xingyin looked up and saw a boy with short silver hair nimbly jump down from the balcony on the second floor. So you brought someone. The silver-haired boy glanced at Gu Xingyin, a trace of surprise flashing through his eyes. This is the princess of the Weixing family, Miss Ying Luo, right? Hello, I'm Beitang Sun. Gu Xingyin smiled and greeted him. Beitang Sun was a famous playboy among the pure-blood nobles. It was said that he changed girlfriends faster than he changed clothes. However, he was powerful and had a noble bloodline. Even though he was known as a playboy, there were still countless female vampires who wanted to get close to him and have a good time with him. Wei Xingliang didn't want his sister to have too much contact with him, so he changed the topic. Where are the others? This others was the representative of the other two pure-blood noble families. Beitang Sun looked upstairs. They're all here. They're upstairs. There were only 4 pure-blooded vampire families left in the world. The Weixing family, the Beitang family, the Fujiwara family, and the Suzumiya family. Of the 4 clans, the Weixing clan was the most powerful. Therefore, when Wei Xingliang proposed a meeting, the other families could not refuse. Fujiwara Shizuru from the Fujiwara family and Gu Xingyin from the Suzumiya family had both met before, which saved him the trouble of introducing them. After the 5 of them were seated, Wei Xingliang went straight to the point. I'm here today to talk to you about the Vampire Hunter Association. Shizuru Fujiwara was an extremely charming and seductive woman. She raised her eyebrows lazily. Vampire Hunter Association? What kind of organization is this? A few bored humans formed to deal with us. What happened to them? Wei Xingliang glanced at her. Tingtang Jing's personality was the most arrogant among the 3 of them. She was also the only pure-blooded among the 3 who did not have any involvement with the Vampire Hunter Association. The reason she didn't have any involvement was very simple. She looked down on humans. She even looked down on mixed-blooded vampires, let alone humans who were inferior in the eyes of vampires. Weisheng Liang said in a low voice, "I'm here today to tell you that the Weisheng clan is preparing to make a move against the Vampire Hunter Association." Chapter 1054. Shirzua Fujiwara didn't react to Weisheng Liang's words. But it was different for Beitang Sun and Ryagakuwa. Beitang Sun's lazy expression finally turned serious. He looked at Weisheng Liang. "What's wrong, Liang? Did those vampire hunters provoke you?" Weisheng Liang said in a cold voice, "There are vampire hunters trying to kill Ling Luo. If we don't teach them a lesson, those humans who don't know the immensity of heaven and earth won't know their place." Beitang Sun looked strangely at Gu Xingyin, who had been silently sitting next to Weisheng Liang. He knew the power of a pure blood. An ordinary vampire hunter couldn't do anything to a pure blood like Weisheng Luo. But Weisheng Liang was furious. He didn't want to let the Vampire Hunter Association off just because his sister was fine. Beitang Xuandai thought about it for a moment. What if she had a younger sister, and she was targeted by the Vampire Association, and they even came to attack her? His reaction would be, he was silent for a moment. "What do you want to do?" "Absolutely intolerable." Ryagakuwa looked at Weisheng Liang. Weisheng Liang smiled coldly. "What do I want to do?" "Uproot them, of course." Beitang Sun was shocked. "That's not necessary, right? They just offended Miss Ling Luo. Just teach them a lesson." He had spent a lot of effort to cultivate several spies in the association. He didn't want to see this happen. Ryagakuwa frowned. "Your Weisheng family doesn't have any business in the association, so you don't feel bad. But our Ryagakuwa family is different." Weisheng Liang's attitude was firm. "I'm here today to inform you in advance. Whether you agree or not, the Weisheng family will act according to plan." Beitang Sun and Ryagakuwa didn't look too good. Only Shirzua Fujiwara clapped her hands. "I, Shirzua Fujiwara, only have one thing to say. If a man can't even take revenge when his sister and lover are bullied, what kind of man is he?" Weisheng Liang had become the head of the Weisheng family ever since his parents stopped caring for him. Shirzua Fujiwara smiled at Weisheng Liang. "Head of the Weisheng family, if you need our help, please don't hesitate." "Thank you." Weisheng Liang nodded. At this moment, Gu Xingyin spoke. She looked at the two men who were obviously not looking too good and asked, "Both of you have planted people in the Vampire Hunter Association. Then I would like to ask, have you received any news about the thing that the Vampire Hunter Association is secretly researching?" "Secret research?" Ryagakuwa and Beitang Sun looked at each other and saw the confusion in each other's eyes. No, they didn't get any information. Seeing this, Gu Xingyin knew what was going on. She said, "When the two of you go home, you can ask someone to investigate. Then you'll know whether I'm telling the truth or not. Are your so-called confidants in the Vampire Hunter Association really loyal to the two of you?" When she said this, her tone was flat, as if there was no extra meaning. However, in the ears of the two pure-blooded nobles, they felt extremely ashamed. Since the other party dared to say it so openly, it meant that she was confident. However, the two who claimed to have spies in the Vampire Hunter Association didn't receive any news about this. This was a blatant slap to his face. Chapter 1055. In the end, Beitang Sun still wanted to salvage the situation. "Liang, missing Luo is fine. Can you?" "No." Weisheng Liang glanced at him coldly. "It's about Ling Luo. No matter how small the matter is, we can't let it go. You can think of it that way. Weisheng Luo is my life." After saying that, he got up and took Gu Xingyin's hand to leave. "Oh right." He paused and said, "Next time, when I come, please don't let those messy vampires in. It hurts my eyes." Beitang Sun was stunned as he watched the two walk away. Was that what he called an eyesore? Vampires were originally unrestrained and didn't have any moral integrity. It wasn't like Liang hadn't seen such gatherings overseas. Why did he suddenly dislike it? Fujiwara Shizu looked at him and sneered. You don't believe me when I say you're stupid. Wei Xingliang's words were clearly for his sister's sake. Didn't you see what he did first when he came in? When Wei Xingliang and Gu Xingyin came in, they were sitting on the second floor, separated by a door and a floor. But to the purebloods, this spatial barrier was nothing. They could still see what the other party was doing. Beitang Sun carefully recalled, and his face suddenly changed. No way, Liang, he treasures his sister so much. He couldn't believe it. For a vampire who played around with women, he felt that the most incredible thing in the world was so-called true love. Fujiwara Shizu looked at his stupid face, sneered, and stood up. Look at you two stupid faces. Wei Xingliang even said, she's my life. Do you still think he's joking? I'm leaving too. You two should think about how to get out of this quickly and minimize the losses. The Weisheng family won't stop this time. Fujiwara Shizu also left. Beitang Sun and Ryomi Akawa looked at each other silently for a while. That. Ryagakuwa spoke up. I'd better go home and contact the person in charge of the Vampire Hunter Association. As soon as Beitang Sun heard this, she knew that the Suzumiya family was prepared to stop. He frowned. Are we really going to listen to the Weisheng clan? With the strength of our two clans, there's no need to. Ryomi Akawa interrupted. Kaoru, to be fair, destroying the Vampire Hunter Association is not a bad thing for us, is it? Beitang Sun was speechless. Of course, this was not a bad thing. No matter how much influence the two families had in the Vampire Hunters Association, the organization itself was still against all vampires. You're right. He sighed. I was wrong. That bit of energy and wealth was nothing to the Beitang clan. He might as well use this opportunity to curry favor with the Weisheng family. Gaining a favor from the strongest pureblood clan, the Weisheng clan, was far more valuable than anything else. On the other side, Gu Xingyin followed Wei Xingliang out of the Beitang family's castle. There was a smile on her face. She seemed very happy. What's wrong? Why are you so happy? Wei Xingliang couldn't help but smile. Because my brother said that I'm your life. Gu Xingyin smiled. This wasn't the first time she'd heard this from this man. But when she heard it, she felt the same joy in her heart. Chapter 1056. Little Fool. Wei Xingliang reached out and patted Gu Xingyin's head. He actually felt very novel. Ever since he was a child, his mother had told him that in the future, he, Wei Xingliang, would be the head of the Weisheng family, and his younger sister, who was the same age as him, would be his future wife. So he had to work hard and make himself infinitely stronger. Because the women of the Weisheng family were born princesses, they would receive the best protection and the best treatment. And the men of the Weisheng family would always be the guardians of the women of the Weisheng family. Before he was 10 years old, he and his younger sister lived together. The little Weisheng Luo liked to stick to this handsome and very powerful brother of his. At that time, the relationship between the brother and sister was very good. Later on, he was sent abroad by his parents for 7 years. That was almost half of his entire life. That little girl in a pink tutu who would softly call him brother in his childhood was becoming more and more blurred in his memory. He liked his younger sister, but he didn't love her. But he had never doubted that he would marry Ying Luo. This was something that was destined from birth. He would be good to her for the rest of his life, but he might not be able to give her his true heart. This was what Wei Xingliang had always thought. Until this unexpected return to the country. That little girl in his memory had become such a lively young girl. When she threw herself into his arms with a smile, his cold heart actually jumped at that moment. The young girl in his arms smiled like a flower, with an innocence that didn't know the ways of the world. But she could still wear such a smile and take someone's life without batting an eyelid. Wei Xingliang looked at this scene and felt that his body temperature had never been so high. As a vampire, he actually had the feeling that his blood was boiling because of her. He knew that he had fallen in love with her. What a strange and natural thing. He had only been back for a few days, but he already loved her to the bone. But she was his destined wife. What was wrong with falling in love with her? Brother? The young girl's puzzled voice brought him back to reality. Brother, what are you thinking about? Wei Xingliang lowered his head and looked at the young girl who was looking up at him with concern. He smiled. I'm thinking, when is the best time for me and my Luo to get married? He watched as the girl's face blushed instantly because of his words. Gu Xingyin really didn't think of this. Although the two of them had done what they were supposed to do, Wei Xinglingluo's body wasn't even 18 years old. Although vampires didn't care about whether they had reached adulthood or not, wasn't this a little too early? Gu Xingyin voiced her thoughts. Wei Xingliang narrowed his eyes. Too early? With a tug of his hand, he pulled her into his embrace. Wei Xinglingluo still had the appearance of a young girl. She wasn't short among humans, but she wasn't tall either. On the other hand, Wei Xingliang was tall and had long legs, broad shoulders and a slim waist. With this hug, he pulled the girl into his embrace and hid her completely, not revealing anything. Haven't you and I done everything we should? Was our marriage contract set the moment we were born? Besides marrying me, do you still think of anyone else? What's the difference between us living together now and after marriage? So, do you still think it's too early? Chapter 1057. Gu Xingyin was left speechless by Wei Xingliang's questions. It seemed that there was no difference between what he said and what he said. However, something still seemed to be amiss. Wei Xingliang smiled as he looked at his sister who was staring at him in confusion. He didn't say anything and took her hand to go home. Gu Xingyin was in a daze as she listened to Wei Xingliang call the butler over and tell him that he would be staying here for a long time. Moreover, he asked the butler to start preparing for his and Gu Xingyin's wedding. Then, Gu Xingyin looked at the butler who had always adhered to gentlemanly etiquette and had always been elegant and perfect. Because of this news, he was so excited that he almost burst into tears. Young Master Liang, you can rest assured that I will prepare everything as soon as possible and prepare a perfect wedding for you and Miss Luo. Gu Xingyin watched the butler walk out with a gust of wind, and a white halo seemed to light up above his head. He's that happy? Wei Xingliang smiled. Don't you know that for the entire vampire race, the appearance of a purebloods marriage is something worth celebrating? And that's not the point. The point is that they look forward to the birth of the next generation the most. Wei Xingliang whispered in her ear. I'm going to rest. I have to get up early for school tomorrow. Gu Xingyin cleverly changed the topic. Such a dangerous topic, she absolutely couldn't continue. And the matter of the Vampire Hunter Association seemed to have been temporarily put on hold. Gu Xingyin asked Wei Xingliang, but Wei Xingliang only said that it wasn't time yet. Trust brother, you don't have to worry about this matter. I will take care of it. Since Wei Xingliang said such words, Gu Xingyin didn't say anything more. Anyway, the mission mentioned by the system was to destroy the Vampire Hunter Association. It didn't say that she had to do it herself. Then, as long as the result was no problem, there wouldn't be a problem. Anyway, there wouldn't be anyone in the Vampire Hunter Association who could threaten her. The next day, Wei Xingliang personally sent Gu Xingyin to school. He seemed to have fallen in love with the feeling of taking care of everything around Gu Xingyin. I'll pick you up in the afternoon. He leaned over and kissed the corner of Gu Xingyin's lips. Then, he got out of the car and opened the door for her. Gu Xingyin walked into the classroom as usual. Wei Xinglingluo. An arrogant voice came from outside the classroom. Gu Xingyin looked over. A handsome boy with dyed yellow hair and silver cross-shaped earrings was looking at her. Song Hai. It was said that his family background was very powerful. In St. Radia High School, where the rich were everywhere, his family situation could be considered to be one of the best. It was rumored that this person had a bad temper. Although he was very handsome, his reputation was not very good. Not many girls dared to provoke him. Gu Xingyin thought about it carefully. She did not know this Song Hai. In her impression, the two of them had never interacted before. Her deskmate Lily whispered to her, "Ying Luo, do you know this Song Hai?" Gu Xingyin shook her head, "I don't know." Wei Xing Ying Luo? Outside, Song Hai didn't hear any response from Gu Xingyin, so he frowned and shouted. Seeing that everyone's eyes were on her, Gu Xingyin stood up. "May I ask this classmate, why are you looking for me?" she asked. Song Hai was originally very overbearing, but when Gu Xingyin really stood in front of him, his face suddenly turned red. Gu Xingyin, she had a bad feeling in her heart. Chapter 1058. Sure enough, Song Hai turned his head away shyly and asked dryly, "I heard that you have a fiancé?" There was nothing to hide. Gu Xingyin nodded. Song Hai's expression suddenly became very strange. He seemed to want to fiercely glare at Gu Xingyin, but he subconsciously didn't want to go too far with her. The expression on his face was simply wonderful. You and him, when did this happen?" After struggling for a long time, he could only ask this question. Gu Xingyin looked at him. "Our two families decided on this marriage when we were young." Song Hai's eyes lit up. "Then do you like him?" "If you don't like him, I can." Gu Xingyin interrupted him. "Classmate Song Hai, I don't know you very well. It's very rude of you to inquire about my privacy like this. My relationship with him is very good. Please don't casually question us." Song Hai's expression became gloomy. He didn't speak. Gu Xingyin glanced around the classroom and found that many students, although holding books in their hands, still looked over from time to time. It was obvious that the students were very interested in gossip. "If there's nothing else, I'll go back to the classroom first. Class is about to start." Song Hai reached out to stop her. "Wait a minute." He stood in front of Gu Xingyin and looked at her seriously. "There are some things that I still feel like I have to tell you. I like you, Wei Xing Luo. I've liked you since the first day you entered this school." He looked somewhat powerlessly at the girl who didn't feel surprised or incredulous after hearing his words. "Perhaps it's the so-called love at first sight. But my family is very strict with me, and has also arranged for me to be a fiancé from another family since I was young, so I've never mentioned it to you. Until yesterday, when I heard people say that you kissed someone at the school gate, I couldn't help it." Song Hai looked at her seriously. "Even if I know that it's impossible for me to be with you, I still want you to know that there's a boy who has liked you for a year. Finally, I wish you happiness." Gu Xingyin finally looked up. "Thank you." When the bell rang, she walked past Song Hai and into the classroom. Song Hai wasn't in a hurry to go to class. Instead, he stood there quietly, watching the delicate girl walk away without looking back, getting further and further away from him. His hands that were hanging by his side opened in vain, as if he was trying his best to hold on to something, but in the end, he could only grab a ball of air. It was something that had never belonged to him in the first place, so how could he possibly grab it? Song Hai's eyes were a little red. Finally, he turned around and left with big strides. Gu Xingyin's deskmates still wanted to gossip with her, but Gu Xingyin didn't want to use a teenage boy's crush as a topic for others to gossip about, so she brushed him off with a few words. What she didn't expect was that after school, Wei Xingliang would kiss her again at the school gate. "What are you doing?" Gu Xingyin looked at him reproachfully. This man, did he think that she was too low-key in school? Wei Xingliang's eyes intentionally or unintentionally swept across a certain place, and then gently pecked her moist red lips. Declaring sovereignty. What? Gu Xingyin felt a little strange. Her heart suddenly moved, and she suddenly saw Song Hai's figure in the crowd. Chapter 1059. Sure enough. She didn't know whether to laugh or cry as she looked at Wei Xingliang. "How did you know?" "No, the point is it worth it?" Wei Xingliang glanced at Song Hai, who had been watching them from the crowd. "As long as it's something to do with you, I know everything about it. Ying Luo, it's impossible for me to put you in a place where I can't see you." This was his paranoia. As for the second question. Of course it's worth it. Daring to covet my Ying Luo, for me, in this world, is even more unbearable than wanting to suck my blood. It was easy to imagine how precious the blood of a pure-blooded vampire was. For those low-level vampires, if they could get a trace of pure-blooded blood, it was almost equivalent to a risk-free promotion. There were even many free vampires who longed to be favored by pure-blooded vampires and willingly became their slaves. Submitting to the strong wasn't a shameful thing. What they could obtain, however, was great power and a long lifespan. Correspondingly, the pride of pure-blooded vampires was well known. No pure-blooded would easily give their blood to others. For them, blood was a symbol of noble status. And in Wei Xingliang's words, there was no doubt that he put Gu Xingyin in the most important position in his heart. Even if it was just words of love, there was no woman who could resist such words of love. Gu Xingyin smiled with satisfaction. Brother, why are you so good at talking? I dare say that as long as you want, there is no woman in this world who can resist your charm and your sweet words. Wei Xingliang also smiled. It's just that in this world, there is only one Ying Luo who is worthy of me showing my charm and listening to my sweet words. When he said this, in addition to a strong pampering tone, there was also an unconcealable arrogance. As he said, there was only one Wei Xing Ying Luo in this world. Worthy of Wei Xingliang, he was willing to do everything to make her smile. Song Hai stared blankly at the two people chatting intimately. He had liked Wei Xing Ying Luo for more than a year and had secretly observed her for a year. He had never seen so much on her face. If he had to describe it in words, it would probably be sweet. The happiness between her eyebrows was almost overflowing. It seemed that she really liked that man. Just as he was silently staring blankly, he didn't know if it was his illusion, but he felt that the man turned his head and his gaze seemed to pause on him for a moment. It was just a glance, and there was no warning in it. It was as if it was just a casual glance, but it made him feel as if he had fallen into an ice cave. By the time Song Hai reacted, the two of them had already gotten into the car and left. Why did you have to scare him? Gu Xingyin complained. She had clearly seen that Wei Xingliang's glance was not a simple one. Song Hai would probably have nightmares for 2 days after experiencing this. Wei Xingliang asked her innocently, What? What was he trying to scare? Why can't I understand what you're saying? Gu Xingyin looked at the man who had a serious expression and a smile on his face. He looked like a male god. As long as you're happy. Wei Xingliang maintained his smile. Daring to covet my Ying Luo, if I don't let you taste a bit of bitterness, how can you learn your lesson? Chapter 1060. As soon as they returned to the Weisheng family, the housekeeper greeted them. Miss Ying Luo, please take a look. The gowns and jewelry samples have been sent over. In addition, I've already informed Master and Madam. They will be back in 3 days, and, as soon as the housekeeper saw Gu Xingyin, he began to ramble. Gu Xingyin once again realized that she would soon be entering the hall of marriage. Although she had already been married countless times. Wei Xingliang smiled as he watched his sister being helplessly dragged by the housekeeper to try on a variety of dazzling jewelry and gowns. The housekeeper turned around. Young Master Liang, you should also go to the 3rd room on the left on the 1st floor. There's a designer waiting for you. Wei Xingliang, whose smile had not yet faded, was speechless. Fortunately, he always had the same elegant appearance in front of outsiders. Okay, thank you, housekeeper. Brother, I don't want to go to school. After dinner, the two walked hand in hand in the back garden of their castle. Okay, you tell the housekeeper. He'll take care of the follow-up. Wei Xingliang agreed. It was Gu Xingyin's turn to be puzzled. You're not going to ask for the reason? Wei Xingliang smiled. Human knowledge is of no use to us. If you don't like it, of course you won't go. Why do you need a reason? Gu Xingyin was speechless. Having a brother who unconditionally pampered you and indulged you was both sweet and sad. She laughed softly. You'll spoil me. Wei Xingliang's voice was low and mellow. In the gentle night breeze, it was like the coldest wine. If I spoil you, then so be it. I'll spoil you. Who dares to say anything? Then, his hand was grabbed by Gu Xingyin. "Brother, feel it carefully." A turbulent power surged in his blood. Even though there were 2 layers of skin between them, Wei Xingliang could still feel the enormous power. "Ing Luo." He looked at his sister with some surprise. Gu Xingyin said, "I can't control this power anymore, so I don't want to go to school." "You silly girl." Wei Xingliang's somewhat anxious voice reached her ears. Then, Gu Xingyin felt her body being embraced in a broad embrace. It wasn't warm, but it was addictive and comforting. "Don't you feel uncomfortable? Why do you care about other people's feelings? It's not a problem to wipe those people's memories. There are so many ways, but you just have to choose the one that makes you suffer the most." He scolded her with some heartache. Gu Xingyin took a deep breath of the refreshing lotus fragrance. Although she had already guessed her lover's personality, she was still very happy to hear his words for real. Feeling such a strong power in her body, his first reaction was not to suspect the source of this power, but to be concerned about whether her body was in pain. How could she let such a man? Such a man belonged to her, Gu Xingyin. "Weishli, Weishing," said Wei Xingliang snorted. "Wei Xingyin Luo, have I been too gentle with you? Do you feel uncomfortable?" Gu Xingyin Wei Xingliang looked at his appearance and could only compromise. "Okay, actually. I still feel a little uncomfortable." Wei Xingliang raised an eyebrow. "A little?" Gu Xingyin Wei Xingliang gave up. "It's actually very uncomfortable." Wei Xingliang was satisfied. He said in a deep voice, "Wei Xingyin Luo, you have to remember that from now on, your entire body is mine. If you don't cherish your body, don't blame me for being impolite." Chapter 1061. Gu Xingyin was right. Pure-blooded nobles were powerful. Even if the vampire hunters knew about them, they wouldn't dare to provoke them. However, the low-level vampires who wandered the world at night were different. In fact, the targets of vampire hunters were often the vampires themselves. As the pure-blooded vampires, the Weishing family was like an emperor among the vampires. Naturally, they couldn't turn a blind eye to this kind of thing. Wei Xingliang pondered for a moment and finally sighed. "I've always sent people to keep an eye on the Vampire Hunter Association. The people who are prepared to deal with them have already been prepared." He looked at Gu Xingyin. "Originally, I wanted to make a move on our wedding day as a wedding gift to you. But now, it seems that the plan will have to be brought forward." "Wedding gift?" Gu Xingyin didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Destroying an association as a wedding gift for his wife? Only the man in front of her could come up with such an idea. She smiled and said, "There's no need. It's better to get rid of a tumor like the Vampire Hunter Association as soon as possible." Seeing that Gu Xingyin had said so, Wei Xingliang didn't say anything else. He said, "The Beitang family, the Fujiwara family, and the Suzumiya family have all agreed to my suggestion. When the time comes, they will also participate in this matter. Don't worry, this time, not a single fish will escape the net from the Vampire Hunter Association." Gu Xingyin, who hadn't fought for a long time, felt a little itchy. Her eyes lit up. "I want to go too." Wei Xingliang smiled and looked at her. Just when Gu Xingyin thought that he would agree, he smiled and said, "No." Gu Xingyin. "Why?" Wei Xingliang said naturally, "You are my wife. How can I let my wife go to war? Even if the enemy was relatively weak." Wei Xingliang had been taught by his parents to protect and love his younger sister since he was young. He had long had the idea that his younger sister was weak and needed to be carefully and gently protected. Even if he knew Gu Xingyin's strength and knew that she would not encounter any danger, he was not willing to let Gu Xingyin fight with others. Gu Xingyin was naturally indignant. Wei Xingliang comforted her in a soft voice, comforting her, but she would never relent. "Ing Luo, be obedient. Big brother is worried about you." He looked at her helplessly. "You know that nothing will happen to me." Gu Xingyin didn't know what was wrong with her. She wasn't that delicate, and she didn't really want to go. Moreover, if she really wanted to go, Wei Xingliang might not be able to stop her. She was a hypocrite, enjoying Wei Xingliang's helpless look. TSK, TSK, TSK. Gu Xingyin despised herself in her heart. See, this was the result of being spoiled. She felt like she was about to be spoiled. But in reality, she opened her mouth and took a bite of the fruit that Wei Xingliang handed to her. Gu Xingyin sighed in satisfaction. If I'm delicate, then so be it. If I'm spoiled, then so be it. Anyway, one was willing to be beaten and the other was willing to be beaten. Who would dare to gossip? Wei Xingliang looked at his younger sister's satisfied face with a smile, his face full of undisguised tenderness. Well, now it's time to think about it. After the Vampire Hunter Association matter is over, where will the two of them go for their honeymoon? Chapter 1062. Wei Xingliang acted quickly. Since he had already made preparations, he left for the headquarters of the Vampire Hunter Association on the third day after the agreement with Gu Xingyin. Of course, Gu Xingyin stayed in the castle. Although she couldn't go, she had a system that could report her movements at any time. Host, the two sides have already clashed. The Vampire Hunter Association is no match for them. The Research Institute has been uprooted. Host, your man is so handsome. Gu Xingyin, the first part was fine, but what the hell was with the last part? Wei Xingliang's trip took a long time. After the headquarters of the Vampire Hunter Association was destroyed, there were still many survivors who had escaped. These people couldn't be left alive. If you didn't get rid of the roots, they would grow again. It took almost half a month for the remnants of the vampire hunters hidden in every corner to be completely wiped out. After this matter was settled, Gu Xingyin had nothing to do with it anymore. She stretched lazily on the sofa. Recently, she had been getting lazier and lazier. The wedding of the two arrived as scheduled. The wedding of a pure-blooded aristocrat, coupled with the Weisheng family's influence in this world, was so grand that it attracted everyone's attention. Of course, they didn't hold the wedding in a church, nor did they ask a priest to be their witness. A pair of vampires asking a priest to bless them, wasn't that a joke? Although some of the guests present felt a little strange about this, they were only puzzled in their hearts. After all, it was someone else's wedding. Perhaps they wanted to do something different. Gu Xingyin got married under everyone's witness. During the day, the guests dispersed. The nightlife of the castle had just begun. Gu Xingyin and Wei Xingliang changed into more exquisite gowns. Under the witness of all the vampires, they intertwined their necks and pierced their fangs into each other's neck. This was the true mating ceremony of the vampires. Feeling the other's blood flow into their bodies, their cold hearts beat with each other's heartbeats. Gradually, the two hearts beat as one, and they could even feel each other's thoughts. Releasing his grip, the bite wound healed completely. The vampires below bowed in unison in the direction of the two of them, congratulating them. Next, it was the start of a beautiful night. The young, beautiful, and low-level vampires loved such occasions the most. Because here, they could see many adults that they would never see on a normal day. If he was lucky enough to have a good time with those big shots, and if they were happy, they would take him under their wings. That would be equivalent to reaching the heavens in a single bound. Gu Xingyin was dragged outside by Wei Xingliang to the rooftop of the castle. Gu Xingyin looked at him in confusion. Based on her understanding of this man, he definitely wouldn't waste such a beautiful night like this. What are you doing here? Soon, Wei Xingliang told her what he wanted to do. He took her hand and led her to the highest point in the city. Tonight's weather was very good, and the sky was full of stars. It is said that people who kiss under the meteor will be blessed by the stars, and will never be separated. His deep voice was like the most beautiful and mellow instrument. I, Wei Xingliang, never believed in such things, but in Luo, for you, I am willing to try. Gu Xingyin closed her eyes, and a cool touch greeted her. Behind them, endless stars fell from the sky. With the stars in the sky as proof, I, Wei Xingliang, and Wei Xingyin Luo, will never be separated.